Where is that happening, Mr. Harper?
All rise for the jurors. All jurors are present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Happy Friday. So I heard from Deputy Murphy that you guys are so engaged in this process that you're going to have power bars for lunch, and you can have a short lunch, and we'll go till 5:30 today, which is great. We'll plan to go to 5:30-ish, and maybe we stop at 5:20 because that's when a witness is done, or it's 5:32, but I thank you for building in a little extra time. And we'll see how lunch plays out. It may be that it's a little longer just because of the way things are flowing, but I am hearing clearly and have expressed to the attorneys that you are all business and we ought to use your time wisely, which we've been trying to do and will continue to try to do that. And for that reason, we're going to jump right into it. The state's going to call its next witness. Good morning, Mr. Rucker.
Good morning, Your Honor. And good morning, counsel. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Your Honor, the state would call Nurse Terry Sullivan to the stand.
Okay.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you should give the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. If you will, please have a seat. Get as close to the mic as you can. For the purposes of the court's record, please state and spell your name.
My name is Teresa Sullivan. I go by Terry. Teresa, T-H-E-R-E-S-A, Sullivan, S-U-L-L-I-V-A-N.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to shift this around just a little bit so I can see you from the podium, okay?
Okay.
Could you be so kind as to introduce yourself to the jurors by telling them your name and tell them how you are currently employed?
My name's Terry Sullivan. I'm currently an RN in the ER at Emory University Hospital, main campus. I've worked in the ER since 2006.
Okay. And can you share with them just a little bit about your educational background that allowed you to perform your duties as a registered nurse?
I graduated nursing school in 1987 from Castleton State College in Vermont. I completed my BSN from Villanova University 2 years ago, and I'm currently a master's student at Duke University.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how long have you worked in the ER department at Emory University Hospital main campus?
I've worked in that ER since 2006.
Okay. And how long have you been employed with Emory in total?
The same thing, 2006.
Okay. So can you tell the jurors, I want to direct your attention to the evening of September 25th, 2016. And
Okay.
ask you if you remember that date.
I do,
Okay. You remember that it was a Sunday?
yes,
Okay. And were you working on that evening?
I was,
What time did you come on to work that evening?
7 p.m.,
And what time were you scheduled to get off?
7:30 a.m.
7:38. That's a long night, isn't it?
We do 12-hour nights.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how were you assigned within the emergency room department that night?
I was assigned to rooms 11, 12, 13.
Okay. And explain to the jurors what you mean by you were assigned to rooms 11, 12, and 13. What rooms are we talking about?
In the emergency department, we have 3 patient assignments, and our assignments are based upon room numbers, so that whatever patients go into those rooms, those are your patients throughout your 12-hour shift. So I had all the patients that went to rooms 11, 12, 13 throughout the 12 hours that I was working.
If you can recall, can you tell the jurors, was that a particularly busy night?
It was a very busy night.
Okay. And typically, about how many registered nurses work within the ER on any given night? Any idea?
I can calculate it for you.
Okay.
There's one nurse for every 3 beds, so. Like 11 or 12? Oh, sorry, like 15, because I wasn't counting triage and up front and all of that.
Okay, okay. Because in the upfront area of the emergency room, when you come through those big glass double doors, there's a front desk, right?
The lobby manager.
The lobby manager. That is also a registered nurse.
Yes, sir.
And then there are separate individual rooms right to the side of the lobby desk that are triage rooms.
Yes, sir.
And about how many triage rooms are located there in the main lobby?
There's 2 triage rooms located in the lobby.
Okay. Sometime that evening around 10 p.m., 10:15 p.m., did you become aware that a person had come to the ER suffering from a gunshot wound?
Yes.
And how did you learn that?
I can't recall exactly if it came across on the walkie-talkies that we carry. I think it had come across on the walkie-talkie that they needed help in the room 2, which is our resuscitation room. And then people were talking about that there was a gunshot victim in room 2.
Okay. And in your time at Emory since 2006, working in the emergency room, about how many times would you say you have had the experience of working with a person who comes to the emergency room there suffering from a gunshot wound?
That was literally the 2nd time.
Once you learned that we've got a patient there in critical room 2 suffering from a gunshot wound, what do you do?
Well, first I have to ensure that my patients are okay in my rooms, but I kind of ran up to the room 2 to see if they needed help. There were several people already in the room, and I inquired if they needed any help, and they said that they were all set, that I could go back and take care of my patients.
Okay. And if you could, in as much detail as you can, could you describe for the jurors what was the environment like inside of critical care room 2?
It was extremely hectic. Everybody was working very hard at what was obviously a resuscitation. There was kind of controlled chaos, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I know that they were calling for blood products, they were calling for extra doctors to come, they were calling for various equipment and supplies that were in our supply room because we don't use them all that often. So they were having like a runner go to the supply room and bring supplies into 2. There was a lot of communication with the desk and the charge nurse about whether or not we could get her down to Grady, which is a trauma center.
A lot going on.
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, did you participate in any way into the life-saving measures that were taken that night with respect to Ms. Diane Magana?
I actually was not needed in the resuscitation.
So can you tell the jurors, after you kind of went to the room to see whether or not they needed some help, realized that they didn't, what did you do?
I went back to my patients and also kind of stayed out in the emergency department because obviously a lot of nurses were in that room that also had other patients in the emergency department. So I tried to stay kind of aware of what was going on throughout the entire department, obviously in case another patient was having something going on. And of course also attending to my patients.
And so can you tell the jurors, critical care rooms 11, 12, and 13.
We'll work on that if that happens again.
Okay. I didn't know if it was my question.
That's right. Next question.
The location within the emergency room department where your rooms are located, 11, 12, and 13.
Yes.
Ask me that question.
Well, you should stay put, but maybe one of the 2 of you could figure out if that's 1 floor up or down the hallway. I know they're putting in new swipe card things, but they ought to be, okay, Chief will coach is going to take a look too. Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry.
If you can't hear ever what's being said because they're knocking a wall down or whatever, Workday. We'll see. Keep going.
Okay. Your rooms, 11, 12, and 13, within the emergency room department, how are they situated with respect to the family consult room?
Yes, I don't have like a map of the ER available, but room 11 is here, the family consult room is here, and then room 12 is here, and room 13 is here, and the nurse's station for that area is right here.
Okay. And if I could have the assistance of Ms. Convery, I'd like to show you a video
Okay.
of the emergency room. Go a little bit slower, Ms. Convery, so we can let Nurse Sullivan get oriented. Do you recognize that? Can you see that?
That's the ambulance doors.
If you let Ms. Convery know where to stop when you get to
And
room
we're
11.
walking into room 11 and 12.
Okay.
That's the hallway, right there. Stop.
Okay. And so,
You can see the 12 right there.
okay, you've
And the
got a
13.
pointer right there in front of you.
Oh,
Okay, and with the court's permission, if you would step down, watch your step. Okay, and I'd like to, have you ever taught class?
kind of.
Okay, good, well, I'm turning to a teacher. And if you would point out for the jurors, kind of orient them and tell them, are you familiar with this hallway?
Yeah, this is the hallway to this whole zone, which we refer to as the gold zone.
The gold zone. Why do you call it the gold zone?
Random color choice to orient is a big department, so you can kind of direct, different techs are assigned to like the gold zone, blue zone, so it kind of just helps to manage.
I got you.
phones.
I got you. So first, let's start with where would room 11 be?
Room 11 is actually right here,
Okay. And room 12?
right there, right
Okay. Where's room 13?
there.
Okay, those were your rooms that you were assigned with patients, right?
Yes,
Where is the nurse's station where you normally sit?
right there. You
Okay.
can kind of see the corner of the desk,
Okay. And where is the family consult room?
right there.
Right there. That's the doorway.
Yep.
Okay. And can we just go a little bit further, Ms. Convery? And stop.
Yes.
Okay. And you've seen the inside of the family consult room before, right? Can you tell the jurors kind of what goes on in the family consult room? What is its purpose?
We generally use that room for several purposes, but if you need a private area essentially to talk to a family member or potentially to give bad news or to ask them a lot of questions that you may or may not want to ask in front of the patient, it's a little private area. We also use it for a private waiting area if we have somebody in an extremely critical condition and we don't want them to have to be out of the main waiting room, obviously receiving other family members and all, just to kind of give them some privacy. It's a small little room, but it works very nicely for that purpose because it's sort of located, the trauma rooms are right over here. So it's a little bit away or close.
Okay. Ms. Convery, could you show us the inside? Stop. Okay. That's the family consult room. Right? Okay. And if we could go on, and I'd like you to stop Ms. Convery when we get to the nurse's station.
That's what we accomplish it. And we're coming in on the nurse's station. Let's see the back side of it. And there you go. Whoops.
You just tell them when to stop. Right there?
That's, yeah, it's all right here.
Okay. And that's typically your workstation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a seat. Now, can you tell the jurors, after you realized you weren't needed in the critical care room, you went back to check on your patients, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so you were back in this hallway we just saw?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, did you come into contact with or see the defendant in this case, Mr. McIver?
I saw several people, but he was one of them.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, first of all, how many people you saw and where did you see them?
As I was going in between like rooms 11, 12, 13, there was a lot of people coming and going from that little conference room, but there were at least 3 to 4 people out in the hallway. And I couldn't tell if it was overflow from the conference room or if they had just stepped out for any assorted number of reasons.
Okay. Right outside of room 11, 12, and 13.
There you go.
Okay. Now, with a pointer, could you perhaps show the jurors where in the hallway you saw this group of 3 or 4 people?
Right outside of here, right in front of 11, and I saw them when I was coming out of 11 to go into room 12. Because they were like right in here, so I had to kind of go around them to get into room 12.
Okay. Did you guys hear that? Okay.
I'm
Would you
sorry.
that's okay. Just repeat what you just said. Just a little bit louder into the microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was outside of room 11, so I was going in between room 11 into room 12, and they were right outside in that middle area, so I kind of had to walk around them, not that they were obstructing anything, but just the nature of where they were versus where I was going.
Okay. And so, I'm going to show you a photograph. This is State's Exhibit number 3. It should come up on your screen.
Okay.
Is this one of the people that you saw?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And at the time that you saw him, you had never seen him before, right?
Correct.
And you see him in court today?
Yes.
Okay. And the stipulation, I just have to reflect that she positively identified the defendant in court.
Okay, Mr. Samuel raised his hand, which I take to mean he does so stipulate.
Okay. So you saw the defendant and how many other people standing in the hallway?
At least 3 others.
At least 3 others. Can you describe the first person you saw?
I saw somebody that was in the hallway with like a legal pad
Okay.
that was writing on the legal pad.
Okay. One second. Get this little thing out.
I can't see anything with that on the board.
Okay?
Show it to you.
I'm
I'm trying to do it in a way that doesn't obstruct the jurors, the witness, the court.
Right, with the screen right there, it's complicated to, I don't mind if you block the camera, if you want to angle it, but if the jurors need to see it, then you need to angle it in a way that's pretty complicated for Mr. Samuel. I'm not going to say you can't write on it. I don't know if you want to have a chance to look at it, but we have a suboptimal setup in this courtroom.
Okay.
He's going to do the entire examination. I'll move. He's just doing 1 or 2 things, and I'll just rate it.
Let me see if I can cure it.
Sure.
That down a little bit. Thank you. You know, this is mine. It's right here, next to it. Yeah. How about that?
Great. No offense, cameraman, it just was an okay place for it to be in my mind.
Okay. So the first person you saw standing in the hallway was the defendant, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you said a person with a legal pad.
Yes.
Was he a male or female?
Male.
What was his race?
He was Caucasian, an older gentleman.
Older gentleman. Who's the next person you saw?
I saw a woman wearing some Western attire, specifically, I remember the cowboy hat and pink boots and pink cowboy hat.
Okay. Anybody else you remember in that group?
There was another gentleman, I really didn't, there was nothing that stood out about him, but there was another gentleman there.
What was his race?
He was also Caucasian,
Okay. How about his age?
probably middle-aged.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, during the time you saw this group in the hallway, did you ever, were you ever in a position where you were close enough to overhear if anything was being discussed?
I did hear as I was walking between room 11 and 12, tell them. Somebody said the words, tell them. And it struck me as odd.
The two words, tell them.
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, was that when you were leaving room 11 to room 12?
Yes.
Okay. And then, did you ever leave room 12?
Yes.
And when you left room 12, was the group still standing in the hallway?
Yes.
And were you ever in a position to hear anything else from that group?
I was busy and kind of going back and forth, so I really wasn't in a position to listen in on what was going on.
Okay. And listen in, let me just ask you this. You and I have had the opportunity to meet and talk prior to today, right?
Yes.
You were actually kind enough to come down to the office like last year sometime. Right?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, do you have like perfect, like bionic hearing in both of your ears?
No.
Okay. And you're laughing about that, right?
Right.
Tell the jurors why you're laughing about that.
The reference to bionic, but my hearing with age has kind of diminished a little bit, and I recognize that I don't always hear absolutely everything, so we have great teamwork, and I'll utilize my teammates occasionally or have to ask people to repeat.
Right. And is there a distance from which it's really hard for you to hear? Is it a distance thing?
More of a distance thing, yeah.
Okay. So the closer a person is to you,
Right.
the better it is you're able to hear.
Correct.
Okay. And so can you tell the jurors that condition, the deterioration of your ears over age, is it with respect to your right ear and your left ear, or just one?
Actually, it seems just the right.
Your right ear? This one right here?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell the jurors, over time, have you learned to compensate for that?
Yes.
Tell them how you compensate for that.
I'll kind of do this number, and people will repeat, or if it's something that I need to hear, I'll ask somebody else if they heard, to clarify, to make sure I heard correctly.
Okay. How about your left ear? How's your hearing in your left ear?
Not a problem.
Not a problem. So you can hear clearly with your left ear. And on occasion, do you position your left ear in a way such that you can hear?
Sometimes.
Okay. So, hold on one second. Okay. Now, when we had a chance to meet last year, you were actually interviewed, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And prior to your testimony here today, have you had the opportunity to look over the transcript for the interview that you gave us when we met?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think if I gave you the opportunity right now to look at one of the pages in your transcript to see if you told us something different last year
Sure.
about what you heard?
Yes.
Okay. And counsel on page 6.
I don't know the same page numbers as you, but okay.
Well, let me show you. there's no rush, but I'd like for you, for the record, to just take a look at page 6. It's Mr. Samuel's page 3. Just read silently to yourself this section where it says Terry Sullivan on line 1, all the way down to line 14.
Okay.
Silently to yourself. Okay? So let me ask you this. Now that you've had a chance to read that, does that help remind you what you told us last year when we talked?
It's basically the same thing, just more words.
Okay. And can you tell the jury what are the more words?
I want to be clear, are we asking what was told to the DA or what she actually heard?
Or was her recollection refreshed by having read that? I think that's where I think we are.
Okay. Now that you've had a chance to read that silently to yourself, is your memory kind of refreshed?
Yes.
Okay. About what you heard in the hallway
Yes.
first, and then what you told me last year?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell the jury what are the extra words that you heard?
This is what you're going to tell them.
Were there any other words that you heard?
It was a longer conversation. It was tell them, and then there was some other words, and then this is what you're going to tell them.
Okay. And so can you tell the jurors, at the time that you heard the group of people that included the defendant saying those things, were you aware that Ms. McIver had been suffering, well, was in critical room 2, suffering from a gunshot wound?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors that statement that you heard, did it resonate with you? You understand what I'm trying to say?
It did.
And so because it resonated with you, what did you do?
Well, I knew that we were very busy and that I wasn't in a position to be able to listen further, and I was concerned, did I hear correctly? This can't be happening. So I requested one of my colleagues to kind of hang out, that was not an RN, she's a tech, so she's kind of able to be more mobile in the department, to kind of hang out and see what she could hear to either corroborate what I heard or to hear further if there was, in fact, some kind of a inappropriate discussion going on.
Because that was the impression that you had, right?
Rational leading.
What impression did you have when you heard that?
I had the impression that there was a plan being enacted. They were actually kind of huddling like you would think of a sports team, literally holding on to each other in a small circle.
Like a football huddle?
Yes.
The woman that you saw with the hat, let me show you State Exhibit 257 that's already in evidence. Do you recognize that?
That's the woman that was wearing the hat, yes.
The older male with the legal pad, at any point in time when you had the opportunity to observe what he was doing, did you see him doing anything with the legal pad?
He was consistently writing on the legal pad, and he was walking around the department in and out. I don't know around the entire department, but I know from where I was, he was coming and going from that conference room area.
Okay.
And I know that he was writing more than a few words because he was definitely at least not on the first page of the legal pad because it was turned, and he was writing on at least page 2.
Can you tell the jurors the name of the tech who was working in the department that had more freedom to move about and possibly hear other things?
Alicia Redding?
Alicia Redding. Can you tell the jurors what is her race?
She's African American.
And can you tell the jurors, do you know whether or not Alicia Redding still works at Emory University Hospital?
She does not.
She does not. Do you know where she is?
I know she's, I think, in Florida, but I'm not for sure.
Okay. And you haven't spoken to her recently, correct?
I haven't spoken to her since she left Emory,
Okay.
and that was a while ago.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, because I want to make sure, can you tell the jurors, did you ever get with a whole bunch of nurses or anybody in the hospital to kind of come up with your testimony here today?
No, sir.
Okay. You were pretty emphatic about that when you said that to me, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And let me ask you this. Can you tell these jurors whether or not at any time, since the night of this incident until the day that you sit here today, did anybody from the Atlanta Police Department come and speak with you about what you saw or heard that night?
No.
Is my office the first time you were contacted about this case?
Yes.
And that was in 2017?
I think so.
Okay. Ms. Sullivan, thank you very much. You've got someone with you here today?
My significant other?
Yes. I appreciate you guys being here because you were here yesterday as well, too, right?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Judge.
Mr. Samuel?
Oh,
Not quite, Mr. Samuel.
not quite. I'm sorry. I've got one small area. It won't take long.
We'll stop and start for Mr. Samuel.
Okay, just one small area. Let me ask you this. At some point in time during the evening, did you learn that Miss McIver did not survive her injuries?
Yes.
Okay. And were you also present in the emergency room when Mr. McIver was admitted to the triage department?
Not to the I was present in the emergency department at that time, yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, did you actually come into contact with him after that?
He was my patient.
Explain that to the jurors.
He had, after finding out that his wife had passed, he signed in as a patient, and he was my patient.
What do you mean he signed in as a patient?
He requested to be seen for, I believe, anxiety.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors the policy and the procedures there at Emory University in the emergency department, is that an uncommon thing that people sign themselves in complaining of anything?
It's not uncommon.
Right. And so once a person signs in, tell the jurors what happens.
Assuming that they're stable, meaning that their vital signs and they're awake and talking, they get triaged in the triage area. And then when a room is available, they get assigned to go to a room, and then they have a nurse and a doctor that takes care of them.
Right. Now, when you say that he was your patient, what does that mean?
He went to room 11, and he was my patient.
Do you know about what time this was?
I would really have to consult with the medical record to remember exactly, but it was definitely in the wee hours of the morning to the early morning.
Okay. And would you have been the first person to see him in room 11?
The first person to see him in room 11, yes.
Okay. Because after you saw him, then who sees him after you?
The physician.
The doctor. And in this case, do you know what doctor came in to see him?
Dr. Rosing.
Yeah. Now, I know this is going to sound like a weird question. How many patients do you think you have evaluated in your career? Just a ballpark.
Literally thousands.
Thousands. And can you tell the jurors, have you ever had the occasion to evaluate a patient who has complained of anxiety?
We do periodically have patients that come in with anxiety post losing a loved one.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, in as much detail as you can, could you describe what happened when, well, first of all, let me lay that foundational question. Did you evaluate Mr. McIver?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jurors what you did when you evaluated him?
As per our protocol, I went through what we call a secondary assessment, which reviews, first off, if they have any allergies, second of all, their chronic medical conditions, if they've ever had surgery, what medications they take, and then the assessment on the nurse's side continues with things such as how is their breathing, you know, are they pink, warm, and dry, or maybe are they pale? In his particular case, I would have paid, and I did, particular attention to the mental health component of the assessment. Was he alert? Was he kind of dazed off? What I like to refer to as kind of that state of shock, that deer in the headlights kind of thing. So I evaluated all of those things about him.
Okay. And after you evaluated Mr. McIver for all of those things, can you tell the jurors what was your opinion with respect to his complaint of suffering from anxiety?
I documented that he was calm and cooperative. I didn't at that time see any like restlessness we see with patients that are anxious. I didn't see hyperventilating, which we see with patients that are anxious. I didn't see fidgeting, things of that nature. He was speaking without difficulty in a very calm manner. And he was not crying.
He was not crying.
No tears.
No tears. And you did this after you found out that his wife did not survive her injuries.
Correct.
Now, during the evaluation of Mr. McIver at this time, can you tell the jurors, did he ever report to you that he suffers from a sleep disorder?
No, and I specifically asked if he had any chronic medical conditions. I scripted the same for every patient. Do you have any conditions with your heart, lungs, kidneys, thyroid, diabetes, or any other chronic medical conditions that you are or have been treated for? And additionally, I asked him what medications he takes, and that also would trigger because sometimes people forget that they have a medical condition or they don't view it as a medical condition if they're taking medicine for it. They view it as taken care of, old history kind of thing, and there was nothing there either.
Did he ever report to you that he suffers from amnesia sometimes?
No.
And as part of the evaluation, let me ask, do you go into detail, like in this case, about any of the facts or the circumstances surrounding the shooting? Did you ask me anything about that?
I did not.
This is 259. Not on this copy. Excuse me, I apologize, Judge, for the pause.
That's okay.
I just want to make sure we get it right. At this time, Your Honor, I would like to tender into evidence State's Exhibit number 259. It is the medical records from Emory University Hospital Healthcare for Claude McIver. The certificate of authenticity from the hospital is dated September 26th of 2016 by Ms. Audrey Jenkins, and I don't believe there'll be an objection.
Mr. Samuel, I understand that you're wanting to make sure that's the totality of them, but we can always supplement that, or if there's something extra in there. Any objection for this, at least as a placeholder, 259?
No objection, I'm just trying to make sure that mine's front and back.
Okay, and you'll certainly have time to do that before the record is completed, but I'll admit 259.
Thank you. Just take a look at this. I'll let you look at the whole thing,
Okay.
but I've got a couple of pages flagged for you.
Okay.
And so once you look at the whole document to make sure you recognize it as the medical records from Mr. McIver, then you would flip to the first orange flag page.
Yeah, this is my assessment.
Okay? That's your assessment. Mm-hmm. Those are the notes that you entered into the official record there at the hospital regarding the evaluation you did for Mr. McIver.
Yes, sir.
And contained within your notes, you can just look over them because although they're in evidence, we don't have to read the whole document. We've heard your testimony. Can you tell the jurors your descriptions that you've given them here this morning, are they contained within those notes that are contained in State's Exhibit 259?
The physical assessment is correct. Everything was normal. The mental health assessment, psychosocial, is more detailed in my notes that I couldn't recall completely off of the top of my head
Okay.
without the reference.
Okay, now that you've had the opportunity to look at the mental health assessment, can you tell the jurors what were your evaluations and your opinions with respect to his mental health assessment that night?
Well, as I said, he was alert and oriented, calm and cooperative, but I documented specifically what it was that he said to me, verbatim in the notes. He stated that he needed, quote, something to help me cope. He kept telling me his wife died unexpectedly tonight. He made no reference to a gunshot wound at all. He just kept saying that his wife died unexpectedly tonight. He stated he had no family and he would call them in the morning. He was here with a friend. I actually also screened him for suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation as part of any psychiatric-related complaint, and he denied both of those.
So when you say you screened him for suicidal and homicidal ideation, what do you do?
I kind of talked to them about how are they feeling, are you feeling hopeless, that's how we got to that he didn't have any family here, but that he was here with a friend, so he had somebody to kind of lean on to help him cope. And I literally will ask them, do you feel like you want to hurt yourself? But it's not that direct. We kind of talk a little bit first to make a comfort level.
And with respect to both of those ideations, he responded to you in the negative note.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else that we need to, I know what it was. Flip over to the blue tab. And can you give the jury some idea with respect to the times? What time did Mr. McIver check himself in? And then do you know what time it was that you would have seen?
Yes, he checked in at 4:40 in the morning, yes, on the 26th.
Okay.
And I did my assessment at, let's see, I should have a time on here. Oh, also part of my assessment was asking him about, does he drink alcohol, smoke, all of those kinds of things.
Oh. What did he say in response to your question about whether or not he drinks alcohol?
He said occasionally he'll have wine with dinner, I believe.
Wine with dinner?
Hang on, I wrote it exactly verbatim. I have to find it. Social history. Alcohol, yes. Comment, occasional with meals is what he told me, is what he drank.
Occasional with meals.
That's literally what he said. And no smoking, no recreational drugs. But I did my assessment at 5:08.
Now, this might seem like a weird question, but I want to ask you this question. Did Mr. McIver ever tell you that when he drinks red wine, he doesn't like red wine because it gives him a headache? Did he ever tell you anything like that when you asked him about his social drinking?
He said exactly what I wrote, that he drinks occasionally with meals. And I always write exactly what the patient told me.
Why do you do that?
Actually, I'm just thorough to a fault, and I was taught that you don't summarize. If you can use the patient's exact words, that's what you use.
I'd like to show you another document. And before I do that, Judge, I'd like to, this is Diane. I would like to tender into evidence State's Exhibit number 241. They are the medical records for Lambda Diane McIver. They too have a certificate of authenticity from Emory University Hospital. And understanding that there's no objection, I would tender 241 into evidence, Judge.
Any objection? Mr. Samuel, subject again to making sure that everything that should be in there is in there. Okay, admitted.
I'd like for you to take a look at this page, Mr. Samuel. It is, in this copy, it says page 2 of 172. Let me show it to you first.
So much for bait stamps.
These are the originals, and so.
Okay.
Okay. Let me ask you to take a look at State's Exhibit 241. And without telling the jurors what this document is, okay, I just want you to look at the document, and specifically, I'm going to point you to this line right here that says date pronounced dead and time pronounced dead, and the pronouncer's name with title, okay?
Okay.
And I would like for you to tell the jurors what date was Diane McIver pronounced dead.
September 26th of 16.
Okay. What time?
Military time is 00:45, which is 12:45 in the morning.
Okay. And who was the person who pronounced her dead?
It looks like Marty Sellers.
He's a doctor.
Yes.
Marty Sellers. You know him?
No.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sullivan. That's all my questions.
Okay. Now, Mr. Samuel.
Yeah, that's right.
Good morning.
So let me begin with the last topic. My name is Don Samuel. I think
Good to meet you.
A week or two ago.
Just a hello, yes.
Passing
In that conference room.
In that conference room, that's right. But we didn't have a chance to talk at that time, right?
Correct.
I want to start where the last topic that Mr. Rucker covered, which was the Mr. McIver's visit to the ER, where you actually were you did the intake.
I did not do his triage.
Okay. What was it that you were doing? That you were just
I was his primary nurse.
primary nurse. Okay. So you interviewed him, correct?
Yes.
And I suppose it's obvious, but both when you interview, and you just said you're very thorough, and I assume the doctors are also thorough in their charting, you record accurately your observations as well as what the patients tell you, correct?
Correct.
I would assume every university does not prescribe medication, controlled substances when it's not needed. Is that correct?
I would presume that they don't. I'm not sure what you mean by the question.
If it's just obvious, you can say yes. I would assume that you agree with me that there's no doctors that ever just regularly start prescribing medication when it's not necessary, correct?
Correct.
And people would not write things in the medical records that are false, would they?
Not that they believe to be false.
You wouldn't.
Correct.
You know Dr. Rosing, R-O-S-I-N-G?
Yes.
He wouldn't, as far as you know, would he?
Correct.
I've put in front of you the medical records that Mr. Rucker just put in evidence that relate to Mr. McIver, okay? Okay. Say yes or no, because
Yes.
we can't do uh-huhs here, okay?
Yes.
Fair enough?
Yes.
And I realized that we do have the same numbering system because on the bottom left of the page, hopefully your version, not the very first page, but beginning on page 2, is page 1 of 73. Not the very first.
Yes.
Okay. Is yours also say page 1 through 73?
Yes.
Excellent. So we'll have the same page numbers. So let's start with page 1 of 73.
Okay.
And would you agree with me that the admitting diagnosis, you see that? It's
Admitting diagnosis, I see.
anxiety disorder, correct?
That is what it says on here. I'm not for sure if that is what the patient stated that they came in for, or if that was what the final diagnosis was.
I'm just going to go by the medical record.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Rucker wants you to ask you more questions, he can do that.
Okay, yes.
What it
But you're
says,
free to explain your answers. I don't want you to take that the wrong way. You're free to explain your answers.
Thank you.
what it says on the medical record is admitting diagnosis, anxiety disorder,
Yes.
okay? Reason for visit, anxiety disorder,
Yes.
okay? Secondary diagnosis, major depressive disorder, single episode, correct?
Yes.
And then it says adjustment disorder with depressed mood, correct?
Yes.
Okay? Then it talks about a knee joint or some other diagnosis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the next page. Now we're on page 2 of 73. And this is where it's reporting chief complaint from nursing triage note.
Yes.
Okay? Chief complaint, anxiety, anxious, correct?
Yes.
Okay? And then it says the patient presents with anxiety, correct?
Yes, that's the triage note.
The onset was 3 hours ago,
Yes.
okay? I'm just going to read, you just need to say yes.
Okay,
because
I'm sorry, I didn't know what you were waiting for.
No problem. The course duration of symptoms is constant and worsening.
Yes.
Character of symptoms angry,
Yes.
okay? The degree of symptoms is severe,
Yes.
and then it says self-injury, none. There are exacerbating factors, including family problems, and patient wife was just a patient here for gunshot, which you reported, right?
Yes.
And she died.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so when you said before that he never said anything about a gunshot,
He did not. This is the discharge paperwork, the ED physician's report, what he wrote. This doesn't say that the patient said that.
oh, so this is what the doctor actually diagnosed all the anxiety and depressive mood.
This is a combination,
He interrupted you. You can keep talking.
okay. This is the final report for medical records. The history of present illness combines like pieces of the triage note with pieces of the doctor's note for the final medical record, and it has like some, I lost what I was going to say now. But in any case, I was not told by the patient that there was a gunshot wound. The doctor wrote in the record that in his physician's record, which is, I saw it in a different part of the chart, that was his observations, not what the patient said to him.
Do you know what he said to Dr. Rosen?
I don't. I only know what's in the medical record.
Do you know what he said to the triage nurse?
It's not in quotation, so I wasn't there. I don't know.
You just know what he said to you.
And what he said in any other part of the chart if it's in quotes.
Okay. Let's go to the next page. Now we're on page 3. Psychiatric symptoms, anxiety, depression, correct? About 6 lines down. Okay. And then we have medications that are prescribed, correct?
Inpatient medications, prescriptions, yes.
Okay. So Dr. Rosen prescribed medications for anxiety and depression, correct?
He prescribed 4 Xanax pills.
Okay. And he prescribed Ativan.
We gave him 1 Ativan
Okay.
in the
And he
ER.
prescribed Xanax. Those are both controlled substances, aren't they?
Yes,
Dr. Rosen wouldn't write a prescription, you said this before, if in fact there was no medical need, correct?
correct.
Okay. Let's go to page 5. With me? Right above the word assessment. It says psychiatric, mood and affect, anxious, depressed, tearful.
That
Is
is,
that what it says?
that is not my note.
I'm not asking if it's your note. Is that what the medical record
Yes,
says?
yes.
Who wrote that?
I was trying to look. This is, I believe, the doctor's evaluation.
Okay. You wouldn't write something inaccurate as far as you know in a medical record, would you?
No.
All right.
Yeah, this is the doctor's assessment.
Okay. And then he does a diagnosis, a couple lines down from that, correct?
Yes,
Differential diagnosis, anxiety, depression,
yes.
not alcohol intoxication,
That is what
Not-
this says.
not drug abuse, not Medicaid reaction, not dementia.
Correct.
What does DDX mean?
I believe it's diagnosed.
Diagnosis as above patient's wife just died from gunshot wound and he is very upset, correct?
That's what this says.
That's the medical records
That is what is written right
that
here.
the doctor wrote.
Yes.
Go to the next page, page 6. Diagnosis, feeling grief, depression, anxiety, correct?
Yes.
Let's go to page 9. See under respiratory symptoms, shortness of breath.
That is what the patient complained of. That's not an observation.
Okay.
That's my assessment.
Your assessment.
Yes.
All right. Now, when a patient is discharged, the folks at Emory will often give advice to them, correct?
Discharge instructions, yes.
That's exactly what I was looking for, discharge instructions, and those are in writing, correct?
Yes.
And you keep a copy of those in the medical records also, right?
It's kept electronically, yes.
Okay. And they're included in our package here, correct? Let's look at page 25, for example.
Yes.
Okay? And so, what'd you call it?
Discharge instructions?
Discharge instructions included instructions for grief reaction and depression, correct?
Yes.
That's what was given to him.
Yes.
And you, meaning Emory, explains to the patient some of the symptoms you're going to have based on depression and grief, correct?
Some of the symptoms you could possibly have. It's not a guarantee.
I would hope not, right. But these are instructions to patients to kind of guide them in case you have certain problems, right? It's
Yes.
Right. And what it says is, and I'm on that first page there, page 25, second paragraph, there may be a tendency to want to overwork or become so busy that you distract yourself from the intense pain you feel. Or you may lose all interest in work, correct?
Yes.
So some people in grief overwork, right?
Yes.
They may go to the office from 7 in the morning till midnight to deal with their grief.
As a diversion mechanism, yes.
Because they can't cope right then, right?
Correct.
You lose a parent, you lose a spouse, you lose a child, and what you may do is just work, right?
That is a possibility.
You don't want to be home either. You may want to get out of the house where the child or the parent or the...
Everyone is unique, but yes, that is one possibility.
Everybody's unique in how they deal with grief, right?
Yes.
Overwork is one of the things that people...
A possibility.
And you give advice to the patient what to do. Turn the page, if you would. Do not isolate yourself from others. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Have contact with family and friends. Talk about your loss to those closest to you.
Yes.
Okay. Don't go into a corner and hide by yourself, right? Talk to people.
Correct.
Okay. You go to page 31. For the next 8 hours, you should be watched by a responsible adult to look for any worsening of your condition, correct? See that under home care?
That actually says if you had procedural sedation, which he did not.
So all of that is these are all the records that were prepared by you, sometimes reciting what he said, sometimes your observations, sometimes what Dr. Rosing observed, and sometimes what Dr. Rosing prescribed, and telling him what to do with grief, telling him how to deal with it, telling him the kinds of issues that face people who have lost a loved one, correct?
Yes.
Now, let's go back in time, both
Okay.
to the beginning of his direct examination, Mr. Rucker, and to earlier that night. You actually never saw Ms. McIver, correct? You never, unless you passing by.
Outside of sticking my head in the room to see if they needed some help, no.
And there were many nurses who were on duty, correct?
Yes.
You've heard from some of them here. You probably saw them out in the hall yesterday, correct?
Yes.
Nurse Brown, Nurse Neely,
Yes.
are there more out there, should we expect today, out there?
I think there's only doctors today. I'm not sure.
All right. All right. And you answered Mr. Rucker questions before about, you all didn't talk about this case at all?
Not in the sense of talking about like evidence or anything of that nature. We talked about the case in terms of like, when are we going to trial? I had a discussion with Allison about, because we hadn't heard yet what day we were going to be called to testify. So we were talking back and forth because we're both charge nurses. So we have to be able to cover the schedule. So we spoke of that sort of thing and just some general tips for how to testify, but not like details of the case, because we were instructed that we're not to do that.
When were you instructed not to do it?
Actually, we know it's part of basic protocols if you're potentially going to be a witness, that you, I want to say that, well, I know that when I met with the district attorney, he told us not to be discussing the case with anyone. I know that today, when we came in yesterday, we were instructed as soon as we got here, we can't come in the courtroom, we can't discuss the case with anyone. I know that it's part of the trauma curriculum from the Emergency Nurses Association, that if you are by chance involved in trauma care, that you need to have preservation of evidence, which involves not discussing things. And I want to say that our boss may have even told us that we needed to have the strictest of confidentiality due to, in this case, the high-profile nature of the case.
Do you remember talking to all the nurses that this case was like OJ?
That was a discussion with the techs were having, yes.
Is it true that everybody in the ER was talking about it and they were likening it to OJ? And
I can't say everybody, because there were a fair amount of people that were working on the resuscitation and other things. It was, to what I observed, it was some techs that were not directly involved in the care, that were helping in the rest of the department, kind of off in the triage area that were.
you said you wouldn't use the words everybody, but those are exactly the words you used when you were talking to Mr. Rucker a couple of months ago. You said everybody in the ER was talking about it, and they were likening it to OJ and Cato Kalin. Those are your words, weren't they?
I didn't mean everybody in the literal sense. We were having just a generic discussion. But yes, there were a lot of people, but not literally every single person.
And they were likening it to OJ and Cato Kalin, right? And some of the nurses in the ER, some of the techs, the people you were talking with, that you heard, were saying, he's going to get off because he has money.
That is correct.
That's what the nurses were saying. Just like OJ got off because he had money.
That is what was said by one of the techs.
That conversation went round and round the emergency room, didn't it?
I don't think it went around the whole emergency room. I think it was just in that one area that people were kind of congregated, that were just very overwhelmed because we don't see gunshot victims. And it was just,
So you all, that night,
Should you finish again? You can finish what you were saying.
we were all just feeling such a sense of shock. And I think some of it was, as with grief reactions, you talk to each other kind of for some support about what it is that you saw, how you're feeling. And honestly, some of us were angry that clearly someone had shot her and that it was an unfair situation. And I'm not sure how it came around because I wasn't in the room, but we were talking along those lines as part of, they call it debriefing, kind of to help give each other support.
but it was going around and around that you thought he was going to get off like OJ, correct?
I don't know what you mean by going around and around.
Your words.
It was going around, people were talking about it
Why that night were people already talking about getting off?
because of the fact that he was a high-profile person with a lot of money, and it was
How
not.
do you know he was a
Can you let her finish answering the questions, please? We can just be done.
I'm not for sure how we ended up discovering that he was a high-profile person. I don't know if it was someone in registration that realized who it was. I'm not sure all of the details of how that came to be, because there was so much activity going on and so much, kind of, as I said, controlled chaos. I'm not sure where that information came out, and about Mrs. McIver's community status.
And was it by 11 o'clock at night, within 30 minutes of getting there?
I honestly don't know.
When did the conversation occur that went around and around about him getting off because of his high profile or financial status?
Probably around the time that, and I don't have a specific timeline, as I had said, I was kind of going around the ER to see if anybody else needed help, and how the other patients were. because everybody was in that resuscitation room, so it was in that same time frame when they were working on Mrs. McIver.
You thought he was guilty when they drove into the ER, didn't you?
I didn't even know when he drove into the ER.
You thought he was guilty because nobody with a gunshot would ever come to Emory. Isn't that what you told Mr. Rucker?
That is a true statement that I said we do not get gunshot victims to Emory because we're not a trauma center. They would come in, well, we wouldn't take an ambulance person with a gunshot wound because the EMS know that they have to take them either to Grady or AMC. And in my experience, if anybody comes with a significant gunshot, there's never been a situation that there wasn't something to it that the police ended up wanting to know about or that turned out to be a police matter.
You thought, listen to my question, please, he was guilty when they drove in.
No.
Objection, Judge, she's already answered that question. She says she didn't even know when we drove in.
She did answer your question. If you want to ask a different question, you can do that.
I would like to reference her transcript.
Okay? Meaning you want to, okay.
Do we have another thing popping up? Your Honor, while they print that one for me real quickly, can I begin by showing her mine?
You're trying to get her an unhighlighted copy. Okay.
You just reference me to the page, Councilman.
A page numbers are
Or
different.
just give me a section. Oh, okay. Okay.
Just read that to yourself.
Yes, we've already talked about that.
You thought there was something suspicious as soon as they drove in because there was a gunshot wound. And you're not used to having gunshot wounds in Emory, correct?
I thought it was suspicious that a gunshot wound would come to Emory, yes.
You said red flags went up.
More so to what you're referencing, when I saw the group kind of huddled around with, this is what you're going to tell them, then I started to be suspicious that there was some significant foul play.
What you said to Mr. Rucker was, my red flags went up, first of all, when the patient came in the first place, because nobody that lives in Atlanta and knows anything about Atlanta drives to the hospital with a gunshot wound.
Correct.
That's when your red flags went up.
Correct.
As soon as this car arrived at Emory with a gunshot wound.
Correct, that there was something amiss.
Right. Because nobody in Atlanta would know to go to Emory with a gunshot wound.
You said nobody in Atlanta would know
That's what you said.
to go.
Everybody
in Atlanta knows.
The last place on earth you go to with a gunshot wound is Emory.
I wouldn't specifically say that the last place, but people in Atlanta do know that the trauma centers, there's billboards everywhere, that the trauma centers are Grady and AMC.
Is there any billboard, and there are many billboards in Emory too, aren't there? They got them on the Georgia Tech scoreboard, you got them over Claremont Road, there's billboards everywhere for Emory, right?
Not about trauma.
Right, it never says, whatever you do, don't come to Emory with a trauma, does it?
No billboard would say that.
It brags about being one of the best hospitals in the country, if not the world.
For-
And nowhere does it say, warning, don't come here with a
I
gunshot.
got a compound question. I just want the witness to be able to respond, because it seems like Mr. Samuel just testified.
Well, I'll let him ask this, and then he'll have gotten his point across and we'll move on.
Well, I'm allowed to do leading questions on
You are.
cross-examination.
The leading part wasn't, he said compound. I'm not sustaining that. I'm observing that maybe we're repeating.
You remember my question?
No, I'm
There are
confused, I'm sorry.
billboards of Emory everywhere,
Yes,
aren't there?
yes,
Okay? And they talk about what a great hospital it is.
yes.
Nowhere does it say on any billboard, don't come here if you have trauma.
Correct.
Objection. For the second time, she's answered the question.
Okay, well, it's okay. I'm not sustaining it, but I am directing you to move away from billboards and back to the emergency room.
You told Mr. Rucker that you knew the story was bull when they came to Emory.
Well, generally, the fact that they did not call 911 and that they were having this huddle and putting those two things together, that they didn't call 911, they drove to a non-trauma center, people that are from the community that presumably would know where the trauma centers are, and the fact that they were having like this little, what I'm going to refer to as a huddle, that something about that doesn't make sense.
What you said to Mr. Rucker was, I knew the story was bull when they came to Emory.
Because you do not,
Can I ask that she answer yes, no to my question?
Sure, so you're entitled to explain your answer as much detail as you want to give, but you do need to say, yes, that's what I said. Or,
Yes, that's
"No,
what I
it's not,"
said.
or, I don't remember.
And now she can explain her answer.
She did already explain her answer.
You identified Danny Joe. Remember identifying her?
that was one of the people that was there that evening, yes.
You described her to Mr. Rucker as a bimbo.
She was dressed extremely provocatively.
Did you ask my question, yes or no?
Yes,
When you were talking to Mr. Rucker, what you said was, she's the bimbo.
I said she was dressed like, yes. Because he was asking me to characterize, to describe someone I didn't have a name for. And he was having trouble understanding the type of clothing I was trying to describe. And that conversation went on for a little bit of time in trying to describe her.
He said to you, we're on my version of the transcript, the third to last page. It was actually the investigator who's not here in the courtroom right now. Distinctively, you remember that she had a phone in her hand. Does that young lady you described that had on what's the rest of that?
The set attire.
That set attire, and you said, the bimbo, yeah. And you said, we won't say that in court, I promise.
Right, I thought we were having a casual conversation to try to recall some details and to give them information.
Those are the words you used
Yes,
when you were interviewed by Mr. Rucker, and the investigator was Griffin, correct?
correct.
Is it your testimony that Ms. Carter was there the entire night?
She was in and out as well. I don't know how long she was there in total.
How many times did you see her between, say, 12:30 or 1 in the morning and 6?
I can't recall. My attention wasn't focused on her specifically.
Ever?
Well, she's answered the question, Judge.
Well, there's a difference between, I don't remember how
Right.
many, and ever.
I think you can ask it, just don't interrupt her.
I recall seeing her once or twice at least, but an exact number I can't testify to.
Did you ever see Mr. McIver or the lawyer when she was not present with them?
Mr. McIver or the lawyer when she was not present, many times.
Okay. So there were times when she was not there, but the lawyer and Mr. McIver were together? I mean,
I believe so.
how many people were in the group with Mr. McGuire?
I'm not absolutely sure. I know that there were at least 4.
You remember telling Mr. Rucker that there were 6 to 8 people who were all together in the entourage.
There was at least 4, which by definition, 6 to 8 is at least 4. I can't remember the exact number. Because there were also people in the group that was outside in the hallway was at least 4, and then there were other people in the conference room, which would bring the total up to like 6 to 8 total, with at least 4 being out in the hallway.
I want to make sure I'm clear. With Mr. McGuire, Mr. Maples is the lawyer, correct? You know that name now.
I know that name now, yes.
And Danny Jo Carter, correct?
I believe that's her name.
Okay. So that's 3 people. Later, her husband comes, right? That's the 4th person.
I'm not sure who the 4th person was.
A 4th person comes. Okay? But when you were talking to Mr. Rucker, you were asked by one of the people in the room, how many people you think was in their little entourage there? And take a guess. You said probably 6 to 8 at the peak, but it dropped down to about 4 or 5.
Right.
Who are the other people you're talking about?
I don't know. He asked me to approximate and to estimate.
What did they look like?
I don't recall. I just know there was a lot of people,
Men or women?
and both, from what I recall. And there were people, I knew that there were people in that waiting room that I couldn't see because I was in the hallway and kind of taking care of my patients in 11, 12, 13. You were getting ready to speak.
If I interrupt you again, the judge is going to throw me in jail. So you finish your answer.
There's an intermediate step or 2.
Well, I don't have a checkbook with me, so.
So I know that there was about 4 people in the hallway, and I was presuming, because he asked me, what do you think? And it was not a factual statement. I thought we were having a casual conversation as an investigatory thing so that they could get some leads of what else to look into or not look into. And I assumed that there had to be other people in that conference room. Otherwise, why would you be having a discussion out in the hallway if there was an area in the conference room? The conference room seats about 4 people. So I was surmising, because I was asked to
So let
to
me make sure
estimate.
I understand. You saw 4 people in the hallway. You know how big the conference room is. You assume there must be 4 more people in there because that's how many chairs there are. So when they are doing their investigation, how many people were in this room with you when you were being questioned? Right. Break down my question. Mr. Russell was there?
Yes,
Mr. Abadi was there?
yes.
Ms. Griffin was there?
I really am bad with names, so I can't remember. There were a lot of people in the room, yes.
Yeah, well, I'm getting closer. Siri was there?
I really don't remember.
Told you. Told you you wouldn't get it.
I said, but I was close. I got half the name. The investigator was there? Ms. Griffin?
I don't recall all the people that were in the room. There were many people that I was talking to.
Did you tell them that you were just guessing? How many people were in this entourage?
They asked me approximately and to estimate, so that is my interpretation of the word approximate and estimate.
8.
I believe I said
6 to 8.
6 to 8.
Did you know they were taping you when you were meeting with them?
I don't recall being told, but I was anxious, and I'm pretty sure that if I was absolutely aware that I was being taped, I would have been much more careful how I spoke, because I thought I was giving them just generic information, like if you talk to a police officer or if you talk to someone about something that you observed and that they're going to surmise it into like a report.
So if you were being taped, you would have said different things than if you were not being taped?
Not untrue things, just different characterizations and different word choices that I would not have used, that I thought we were having more of a casual conversation as compared to an official legal conversation.
You remember telling them, tell me you guys are going to be able to nail him.
Yes, I was very upset. That is what I thought I was being interviewed for, is to find out.
To try to nail him.
Let her
No.
finish what she's saying.
Whomever committed the crime. We were all very upset that somebody was murdered and brought to our facility. And
I stopped.
And I am not a fan of anybody, the proverbial getting away with murder. And I wanted to be sure that, you know, whatever needed, not that I gave them the information, and that if there was other things that I knew that they needed to know, that sort of thing.
Okay. Sometimes when I ask you a question, did you say something, I would like you to say yes or no. Did you say, please tell me you guys
Yes.
will be able to nail him?
Yes,
And the investigator, who's no longer here, said, we're going to try hard, right?
yes,
And then Mr. Rucker said, we're working really hard.
yes,
And you say the reason you say that is you don't want anybody to get away with murder.
yes.
You want anybody to be convicted of murder if it was an accident? Do you want that?
I don't want anybody to be able to get away with actual murder.
That was not my question. If it was an accident, do you want someone to be convicted of murder?
Do you want my opinion?
I just want a yes or no answer.
And then you can explain it.
Okay. No, I don't want them to be convicted of first-degree murder, but if I could explain my answer.
I don't think the question really asks for her opinion of guilt or innocence. I asked her a very simple question. If Mr. Rucker wants to ask her opinion of whether someone's guilty or not, having heard no evidence in this case, I would object, and I would move to prohibit her from giving an opinion.
Mr. Rucker didn't ask any question. You just asked a question,
I asked, did she say, are we going to nail her?
and then you went on to say, well, if it's an accident, do you want someone convicted of murder? And
Go ahead.
she's answering that question.
I think that even if it's an accident, people should be accountable for what it is that their action was. Not specifically first-degree murder, but some kind of repercussions for, even if it was an accident.
Okay. You thought, and told the investigators during the interview, that the lawyer was driving the car at the time the shooting occurred, correct?
That was a mistaken impression that I had. Because again, there was so much commotion going on and so much, all kinds of activity, and it appeared that he arrived at the same time.
Do you still believe he arrived at the same time?
I honestly don't know.
Okay. But when you were talking to them, that's exactly what you said. The entire crew.
That I thought. I didn't say it was a fact that I observed. That was the impression that I had.
Well, you need to make sure Mr. Samuel finishes
Oh, I'm
his
sorry.
question. Sometimes his questions are longer, and he hadn't quite,
Okay, sorry.
not Jeopardy, you gotta wait till he's done, because you may answer the wrong question.
You found it suspicious that the lawyer arrived in the car with them.
I found it suspicious, yes.
You found it suspicious that this huge, prominent lawyer was driving the car in which the shooting occurred.
That was the impression that I had.
And if he wasn't driving, he was at least in the car with them.
That was the impression that I had at the time.
Now, I want to go back to something we talked about in the beginning, and that is your observations of Mr. McIver at, whatever it was, 4 in the morning when you became his nurse, right?
Yes.
And you thought that his behavior was odd, what you said this morning, correct?
His behavior when he was my patient, yes.
And you thought, what you said before, that you didn't realize that he told the doctor about gunshot, but he didn't say anything about gunshot to you.
Correct.
Everybody in the hospital knew there was a gunshot that day, correct?
Correct.
Everybody knew that night, that Mr. McIver had been in the car and that they had driven in together, correct?
Presumably.
There were police by that point, right?
Yes.
The APD had come, the DeKalb police had come, and the Emory police were all there, correct?
I'm not sure about if APD was there and DeKalb, but there were definitely police that were not Emory police.
And you were interrogating Mr. McIver like a police officer, right?
No. I asked him specific questions.
And Mr. Rucker said to you, well, he didn't admit to you that he shot the gun. You don't need to know who shot the gun, correct?
I didn't ask him, I'm sorry.
I don't know who's interrupting who now.
Finish your question, please. You guys are now getting a little better at that.
I was asking him medical questions. I knew that his wife had died from a gunshot wound, but I did not ask him because I didn't feel that that would be therapeutic.
And you would agree with me that different people deal with grief in different ways.
Yes,
And you've been a nurse for how long?
a long time.
You've seen a lot of people pass away in an emergency room, correct?
Yes,
A lot of people die in the emergency.
yes,
There's a lot of family members who were there.
yes,
And some people die in the end stages of cancer.
yes,
Some people die in car accidents.
yes,
I don't have to give the long list. We all know that people
Correct.
die, right? Some people die in old age.
yes,
Some people die unexpectedly.
yes.
Children die.
I have not seen that at Emory, but yes,
Spouses die.
yes,
And again, sometimes it's after a long illness. Sometimes it's just sudden and completely unexpected.
yes,
Like a car accident
yes,
or a gunshot.
yes,
And sometimes the family member who was there wasn't present, perhaps, when whatever the accident was occurred, correct?
correct.
Okay, like a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
A parent comes rushing to the hospital because a child is in a car accident, or a spouse, right?
Yes,
Sometimes, when an accident happens, the person who may be responsible would be there, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
The person
question?
who's responsible for the accident or the death might be there.
Yes,
I'll give you an example. You're driving a car, you're a bad driver, and you have a wreck and you kill your spouse.
yes,
You would expect that person, the grief that person suffers, to be a lot different than the grief someone who sees a parent dying of cancer after 10 years, right?
everyone's grief is different, yes.
And you knew from your interviews that Mr. McIver had no family in Atlanta.
I assessed that as part of his coping, what resources did he have for coping?
The answer is yes, he had no family.
Correct,
His family had just died upstairs, right? His wife.
his wife, yes,
Okay. As a result, whatever, we'll let the jury decide, ultimately, as a result of a gunshot, he had the gun in his hand, right?
yes.
You ever had a case like that before? You ever had to assess someone's grief in a situation like that?
Not at Emory.
Is the fact that someone is a military veteran, would that be relevant to their grief? If maybe they've been in a war and have seen a lot of people die, would that affect their grief?
Everything can affect someone's grief.
And grief can come in spurts and over time, right?
Yes,
And some people, like your instructions say, just need to be around a lot of people really quickly, right?
yes,
Not to be alone.
yes,
And then maybe over the weeks or months or maybe even years, the grief starts, right?
yes,
And it can come in waves sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
And you can't seriously tell the jury how someone needs to grieve 5 minutes after finding out who their spouse is expired, right?
I'm not saying how someone should grieve, I'm reporting my observations.
You know Mr. Maples, the one who showed up with, you say, the legal pad. What color was his legal pad, by the way?
Yellow?
Yellow?
I believe so. I didn't at the time, I presumed that, but I didn't, but I now know him to be Mr. Maples.
Well, at the time, you said he was a huge, prominent lawyer in Atlanta. You said that?
I found that out during the course of the night. When I first saw him, I did not know that he was an attorney.
Even that night. And you know Mr. McIver was a lawyer.
I found that all out at about the same time.
And you found it odd that a lawyer would be there talking to Mr. McIver, right?
That a lawyer would be there so quickly talking to Mr. McIver, yes.
He has no family, you know that.
I knew that after the fact. I found that out around 4 in the morning.
I mean, if I was in Emory and I called my good friend and neighbor Bruce Harvey, would you find that to be unusual, a lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer?
I wouldn't find it unusual unless he had a legal pad and was taking notes.
If I called Amanda Clark Palmer, my law partner, would you find a criminal defense lawyer? Would you find that unusual, even if she was taking notes?
It would depend on the circumstances.
You think people of different cultures all have different grieving techniques?
There's cultural patterns of grief, yes, it's in the textbooks.
You remember talking with the lawyers over here about how rich people grieve, being different than other people?
I don't recall having that conversation. I recall talking about different cultures, but I don't recall specifically talking about how rich people grieve.
When the 4 people were sitting outside of room 11 or whatever it was, and the other 4 people, 2 to 4 people were inside to make up the 6 to 8. You said you heard one of the people say, tell them. What time was that conversation?
Probably soon after she got to room 2. She was still alive at that point.
So your testimony is that Mr. Maples was there before 11 o'clock, because she's in the OR by 11 o'clock.
I don't know the timeline by the clock because I wasn't looking at the clock, but there was someone there that I later found out to be Mr. Maples before she died.
Well, you just said before she left the ER too.
Yes, before she left. And
If the medical records show that she's in the OR at 11:03, upstairs on the 3rd floor at 11:03.
okay,
Your testimony is the conversation with Mr. Maples and the 3 other people in the huddle occurred before 11:03.
I would assume so. The reason that I say that is because I don't know exactly. I was not able to visually see what time she went to the OR, so it was around the same time that they were doing the resuscitation, soon after she got there.
Your Honor, I promise I'm not belaboring this, but if she gets, you accept my promise?
Mm-hmm.
If
For now.
she gets to the hospital at 10:15, okay?
Okay.
Is the testimony. And she's in the OR by 11:03. You can look at the records if you want.
That's okay.
She gets to the OR at 11:03. Your testimony is that Mr. Maples is already there talking to Mr. McIver before 11:03. Assuming those two facts, 10:15 and 11:03.
There's another fact that you would need to assume to make that statement correct, and that is because I didn't know when sometimes families will stay downstairs in the ER even after their family members go up to the OR. So that withstanding, I don't know what time the conversation was relative to what time she actually went up to the OR, because the room where she was being resuscitated in is not in my direct line of vision. So I really can't recall at what time that conversation was relative to what was going on. I know it was not soon after Mrs. McIver arrived.
I'm sorry, but you began this series of questions by saying she was still in the ER too. Are you now saying you don't know if she was in the ER too? Just yes or no? Do you know, was she in ER too or not?
I'm sure she had to still be in ER too.
So if she goes to the OR operating room at 11:03, then the conversation with Mr. Maples, where you hear, was it him who said, tell them, as opposed to Mr. McIver?
I'm not for sure who said that, was why I had asked. I believe it was Mr. Maples.
You just believe? You know it was Mr. Maples who, you say, in the conversation with all these people, it was Mr. Maples who said that. Tell them.
The question is what you know now, or what you believe now, and Mr. Samuel can explore with you what you may have said in the past, but the question now is, do you recall who said those words?
Yes, Mr. Maples.
And that would have been before 11:03, because she's still in ER too.
Yes.
And I assume it goes without saying, but it's going to not go without saying, you don't know what he was telling either Danny Jo Carter. She was in that little huddle, right?
Yes.
You don't know what she was saying to Mr. McIver.
Correct.
You don't know what they had said to him.
Correct.
And you don't know who he's even talking about. Tell them.
Correct.
Who's the them in that sense? Do you know?
Correct.
You don't know.
Correct.
Those are all my questions, Mayor.
Mr. Rucker, any redirects?
Yes.
Thank you.
On page 3 of the medical records for Mr. McIver, I think that Mr. Samuel asked you about the medication he was prescribed. He was given Ativan. Typically, what is Ativan? What is it used for?
It's a benzodiazepine used to relieve anxiety.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, do the medical records there on page 3 indicate the dosage of Ativan?
1 milligram.
1 milligram.
Yes.
Does Ativan come in much larger doses?
It comes in larger doses, yes.
Don't want to turn you into a pharmacologist. You know how large of a dose of Ativan you can get from suffering from like anxiety?
We can give it IV up to 2 to 4 milligrams. Well, I've never really given 4, but I know we can give it IV, and I've given 2 milligrams occasionally IV.
Okay. This was a tablet, or was it like liquid?
No, it was a tablet.
It's a tablet. So can you get like a 5 milligram tablet? You know, that's outside your field.
It's kind of outside my field,
Dr. Rosen probably can tell me, though, huh?
probably.
Okay. Xanax. Tell the jurors what was the dosage of Xanax he was given.
0.5.
0.5.
0.5, yes.
Is that like less than 1 milligram?
Yes,
And how many of those tablets was he given?
just 4.
4. And the Ativan, how much was he given?
1 tablet,
1 tablet.
yes.
Could you flip over to page 34? I want to ask you about another time.
Oh, well, you'll need another record.
Medical records. Let me know when you get there. I'll ask you just a quick question.
Yes.
What time was Mr. McIver discharged?
6:13.
6:13.
Yes.
Checked in at 4:40, evaluated at 5:08, and about an hour later, he was discharged.
Yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit number 255. You recognize that photo?
That's our family consult room.
Okay, family consult room. In States 255, is that if you're standing in the doorway of the room, looking at the right side of the room?
I'm sorry?
If you're standing in the doorway,
Yes.
that's a photograph of the right side of the room.
Yes.
Okay, and in that photograph, we can see the ability to see about how many people?
3.
Okay. And this is States 256. That's if you're standing in the doorway, and that's the left side of the room.
Yes.
And that photograph shows the ability to see. We've already got 3. Those are the same 2 chairs, right?
Those are the same 2 chairs.
Okay, so we got 3, 4,
5.
5.
Yes.
And so you've already told us it was a busy night there in the ER.
Yes.
You had patients in the other rooms.
Yes.
You know the other registered nurses had patients in their rooms too.
Yes.
Now, is it possible that the people that were in the room that you think were there, they could have been associated with another family?
Possibly.
Right. Before I move on, let me ask you this. On page 34, I want to make sure we got that discharge time right. Okay. You see a current date, arrival time, and discharge time?
Yeah, the arrival time and the current date that it was printed was at 6:13.
Okay. So let me-
Discharge time, I'm not sure why the computer stamps went that way. That's my... Discharge time. It looks like the doctor wrote for the discharge orders at 5:45, and the discharge actually occurred at 6:13, because there can be a layover of when the doctor puts up the discharge instructions to when we get them to be able to give them to the patient.
Okay, so if the jurors were to look at these records and they would see that there's a discharge time that says 5:45, that really means what?
The time that the doctor was done doing the things that he needed to do and cleared the patient for discharge.
Okay, and then 6:13 is,
The time that I go and bring him the papers and complete my teaching and, refresh if he has any questions or concerns, that sort of thing.
Okay. While we're on times, Mr. Samuel was trying to establish what time it was. You would have seen Steve Maples and Mr. McIver and Danny Joe Carter and one other person standing in the hallway. And he was trying to, he put you in a time frame between 10:15 and 11:03. And I want to ask you about that time frame because of where you were sitting, like around the corner from the critical care room, you don't know what time Ms. McIver went up to the OR.
Correct.
Hold on one second.
Why don't you not testify?
I'm trying to speed up.
Mr. Rucker either needs to bend the road or he needs to ask a question.
I was trying to speed up. I'm sorry.
It's okay. But I think you were fairly recapping some of the extensive back and forth that had occurred to orient the witness. Why don't you repeat the last part of your question?
Do you know what time Ms. McIver went up to the OR?
No.
Okay. At the time that you saw the four individuals standing in the hallway, did you make a mental note by looking at your watch or anything about what time it was?
No.
And can you tell the jurors, and I think I understood what you were trying to explain, but can you tell the jurors sometimes when there are families in the family consult room, can they remain in the family consult room even after the patient goes up to OR?
It's not uncommon at all, because the waiting area in the OR, especially on the weekends at night, is locked. So it's not uncommon at all for us to keep families downstairs until that room can get opened up, and kind of, we like to make sure that there's some water and things like that there.
Right.
So it's not uncommon at all for them to kind of stay downstairs. Plus, they can't go up with the patient, especially in this kind of a situation, because they're really rushing, and so it's not uncommon at all for them to stay downstairs. And we've even had families in the past that while their family member is in surgery, not, for any kind of surgery, that they'll even use our conference room because it's nice, it's private, we have, drinks available for them and things like that, that they'll stay there even until almost the surgery is over sometimes.
Right. So, given what you just explained to the jurors, it's possible that you could have seen Mr. Maples, Mr. McIver, Danny Joe Carter, and the fourth person in the hallway long after Ms. McIver went upstairs to OR at 11:03.
Correct.
Mr. Samuels asked you about Mr. Maples being a prominent attorney. Did you know at the time he was a criminal defense attorney?
No.
Is it possible that the them you were talking about, trying to interpret, he asked you, like, who is the them?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this. Just pure speculation. She said she doesn't know. And Mr. Rucker is now going to tell her and ask her, is it possible?
Stop. You didn't finish your question. So I heard what Mr. Harvey said to Mr. Samuel, prompting Mr. Samuel to get up and object. I'm going to let you finish. I heard your objection.
What he said to me, try to
Oh,
find
okay. It was a valid point. Why don't you state your entire question? Please don't answer it, ma'am, until I hear the question, and then I can figure out what we're going to do with it.
Okay. Take a step back. At the time that you heard Mr. Maples make this statement, the statement being, this is what you're going to tell them, at the...
Stop.
Objection. Not what the testimony was. This is what you're going to tell them. That's not what the question was. On direct examination, on cross-examination, or the testimony of this witness. And Mr. Rucker should not be changing the testimony to formulate a better question than answer.
Fair point. I don't think that was your intent, but let's not change what we've heard so far.
Okay. Perhaps counsel can tell me, give me some direction about what I said.
You've got the transcript?
I wrote it down on the board. What she said. I wrote it down, word for word, what she said.
Okay. You can proceed, and the jurors are going to recall what the testimony was.
What's the objection about that?
I'm letting you proceed. Let's get to the end part of the question. No one's letting you get to the end of the question. That's what I need to evaluate. So when Mr. Maples said what he said,
did you know Ms. McIver had been shot in the back?
No.
Okay. Did you know she had suffered from a gunshot wound?
I think I knew she had a gunshot wound.
Right. Was your expectation that police officers or law enforcement would get involved because of that? You might go to explain about who she thought the them was.
She already testified she didn't know.
Okay. Next question.
Did you see police officers at the hospital?
Yes.
Was it after Miss McIver arrived?
Yes.
Were you ever in a position to see them speak with Mr. Maples or Mr. McIver?
The them being police?
Them being the police.
No.
Mr. Samuel also asked you some questions about whether or not the attorney was in the car or details about the SUV. That night when you were like in the hallway, did you have any details about what happened in the car?
No.
Did you know who was driving the car?
No.
Did you know who was actually in the car?
No.
Okay. And Mr. Samuels asked you a bunch of questions through the transcript. I don't think I'm going to go through every single thing that he said because you talked to us for a long time when you came to interview us,
Yes.
right? And but in your mind, when you were observing the 4 people in the hallway, did you have a question about why did they come to Emory?
Yes.
And that's what you told me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Jurors, any questions for Ms. Sullivan? You would send them to your left. Deputy Murphy will collect them. We'll work through those, and then we'll take a break. Thank you. now, they'll work here. So I'm going to have Deputy Murphy get you sooner than you might want to, but we're going to have our lunch break not all that far in the distance. So please take the time you need. Don't talk about the case. We'll get you back in here to work through which questions will be next. Thank you.
All rise for the jurors.
And Ms. Sullivan, you're free to step down. We'll get you back in here in a minute. Thank you.
Doors still open. Thank you. Please be seated.
Sure.
Just one quick announcement. Prior to the judge coming out, we had asked, gave you instructions about the sounds on your electronic devices. If you are not counsel, court staff, or media, you should not have your phones out or on. For the ones that are allowed to have your phones on, make sure that the volume is off. The judge is the only person that is exempt from not having his phone taken.
All right, Ms. Harris, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Mr. McIver is back in the room. We are back on the record, and we are talking about the proposed questions from the jurors.
Okay. You've labeled 1551 that you're not going to give.
I do not intend to.
We have no objection to giving 47, 48, and 53. Although I think we need to be careful that maybe things you couldn't possibly know the answer to. But
Agreed.
You can ask. We don't object to you asking.
Okay.
As long as you kind of preface it by saying if you don't know. You
Sure, I will certainly do that.
And we have the following observations with regard to 49 and 52. We object to the second part of 49, which asks about symptoms, unless we know for sure that she's qualified to give a medical opinion.
Okay.
And with regard to 52, if I could just state the question on the record so my objection is clear.
Hold on one second. Just let the door close there. Okay.
The question is, are you sure you heard Tex or them say, quote, tell them, close quote, quote, this is what you're going to tell them. Well, nobody ever said Tex said it. So I would object to a disjunctive question where the answer could be yes, and then you don't know anything. It has to be, are you sure you heard the lawyer say, if you ask it at all?
Sure.
And I'm not sure, since we have both belabored it over and over, simply asking the question, are you sure, is really an appropriate question.
I hear you. The way I take this, and then I'll get feedback from the state, is one to which the objection I might receive from either of you would be asked and answered. And that would be a fair objection because it was explored in detail by both sides. But this is the prototypical inquiry where something's not clear in the juror's mind because maybe one side did a good job making something less clear. And there's that right to confusion that is implicated here. And that's on the record. But what I intend to do is not attribute it to anyone other than to whom it has been attributed. The gentleman who said, so not Tex, I don't know that I'll say Mr. Maples, but the guy with the notepad. Would you please tell us what you recall that person saying? That's it. I'm not going to put words in her mouth, and I'm certainly not going to attribute it to Mr. McIver because that's not what she has done today.
And you're not going to say, are you sure?
No. All right. Mr. Rucker, anything you want to add?
I don't have an objection to any of the questions.
Okay. Let's bring the jurors in, please. Are they able to get by? That screen has crept into their space
Yes, they
again.
got out without this.
Okay, just remind them to be careful around that.
Yes, sir.
And we'll move it for the next witness.
All rise for the jurors.
If we could get Ms. Sullivan, please.
All jurors are present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen.
Please be seated.
We're going to get our witness back on the stand. Thank you for returning. I thought you might just walk right on out the building after that. So, Ms. Sullivan, you're still under oath. I've got a few more questions for you, and then I'll see if the attorneys for either side want to follow up based on what you and I discuss, okay?
Okay.
The first thing I'd like you to do is share with the jury what it is you recall the man with the pad saying that you overheard when that group was standing outside the conference room.
Where's my deposition? I recall distinctly the words, tell them.
Okay. Do you know at what points in that evening Mr. McIver learned that his wife had passed away? I don't mean time, that's not a fair question, but people arrive, Ms. McIver ultimately goes to OR. You are treating Mr. McIver. There are certain points, and attorneys may be able to hang times on that for the medical records. Are you able to place in that timeline, if you even know, when it was that Mr. McIver learned his wife had passed away?
I don't know officially when he learned. I know that she went to the OR, and I know that she died, and I know that he signed in as a patient after she died, but I don't know exactly who told him, when they told him, or even where they told him.
Is it your understanding that he was aware she had passed away when he met with you?
Yes, he absolutely, because he said to me repeatedly, my wife died unexpectedly tonight.
When you did interact with Mr. McIver, when you were treating him, if that's the right term,
Yes.
Was he in control of his speech?
Yes, his speech was very everyday speech. He wasn't searching for words really, and he had a normal pitch.
Did he ever speak to himself while you were there with him?
No,
Do you know who called the police such that the police showed up at your emergency room?
I don't. I know it's protocol, but I don't know who made the call.
Okay. And do you know to whom the police spoke while they were there at the emergency room?
I don't.
Did they speak to you?
No.
You described at one point during your testimony that an ambulance would be turned away if it had a gunshot victim in the ambulance. It may have been not quite the phrasing.
Right. The term is diversion, but yes.
Okay. To where would an ambulance be diverted if it was headed towards your emergency room, Emory University Hospital emergency room, and word got in, we've got a gunshot patient on board?
They would go to either AMC or to Grady.
AMC is what?
Oh, I'm sorry, Atlanta Medical Center.
Okay. Mr. Rucker, do you have any follow-up based on the questions just asked?
Just a couple. Ms. Sullivan, let me just make sure I understand. Tell them that you distinctly remember, put that in context for me so I understand what we wrote on the board, which is this is what you're going to tell them.
The first words that I vividly remember was the tell them, and then it was like a softer, this is what you're going to tell them as I was like walking past.
Okay.
So it was like more of a conversation that I was hearing, not like just a one-shot term.
Conversation.
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, in passing, did you hear anyone else in the group respond to that statement?
No.
Okay. Did you linger such that you could hear?
No, I asked Alicia Redding to position herself that she could further evaluate if
What?
I had heard correctly.
Okay. And do you know whether or not she actually did that?
I believe that she did.
And can you tell the jurors, don't tell me anything Alicia might have said or anything like that, but later on in the evening, did you say anything to her about contacting the police?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance, attempting to get in here saying.
So,
Asking her what she did?
no, I understand. I'll allow that question.
Did you tell Alicia to contact the police?
I told her that she needed to speak with the police if, in fact, she heard anything.
Okay. And speaking about the police, can you explain to the jurors, you mentioned the word protocol about the police. What does that mean, protocol?
It's a law that any gunshot wound needs to be reported to the police.
Okay. And so you don't know who at the hospital actually would have contacted the police,
Correct.
but you just know that it's just part of the protocol at the hospital that the police would have been contacted if a gunshot victim comes in.
Correct.
Okay. Are there other kind of cases where the police would be contacted as a matter of protocol?
Stabbings are also reportable by law.
How about injuries to children?
Yes, I'm sorry. Injuries to children, elder abuse.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Sandman, anything? Okay. Ms. Sullivan, thank you for your time. You're free to go. Yes, so Ms. Sullivan, in case you choose to stay, make sure you're not talking with any other witnesses about what went on in here or anything about the case.
No danger.
Okay, well then head on out, but even in passing, other than saying hi, that should be it. Next witness.
Yes. Your Honor, the state calls Dr. Celine Cha-Lar. Like cha-cha-cha, lar, I've been told.
Red?
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you should give the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God? Yes, ma'am, if you will, please have a seat. Get as close to the mic as you can. For the purposes of the court's record, please state and spell your name.
My name is Celine Chalar, S-E-L-I-N, space C-A-G-L-A-R.
Say the second for me closer, please.
C-A-G-L-A-R.
Boy, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me have you sit up nice and straight in your chair and maybe just pull that chair a little closer and lean into the microphone when you respond. If you talk loud enough, hopefully you won't have to repeat your answers, okay?
Okay.
Do you have an outside voice?
No.
You don't? Okay. You have a voice you use when you're fussing at somebody really loud.
It's soft.
It's soft too. Okay, okay. All right, let me start out by standing over here so I can make sure everybody can hear you, okay?
Okay.
Could you introduce yourself to the jurors, restate your name, and tell them how you are employed?
My name is Celine Chalar, and I'm employed full-time as an emergency room attending at Emory University Hospital.
And as an attending, you are a medical doctor.
Yes.
You are licensed to practice medicine here in the state of Georgia.
Yes.
How long have you been a medical doctor?
Including residency,
Yes.
10 years, maybe 12.
Okay. And can you share with the jurors a little bit about your educational background and training that allows you to perform your duties at Emory University Hospital as a doctor?
Well, it begins in college, and after college, I did some research at Dartmouth and then went to medical school in Vermont and then practiced residency in Massachusetts, and then I was at an emergency department in the community outside of Boston for 6 years, and then I came here for the past 3 or 4.
Okay. And so you've been at Emory Hospital for the last 3 or 4 years?
Yes,
Okay. And what department are you assigned within the hospital?
the emergency department.
Okay. And have you been there the entire time you've been at Emory?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, as a medical doctor in the emergency department, just generally, like what kind of stuff do you see and what do you do on a day-to-day?
You name it and we see it. You name it and we do it.
I like that. I
Thanks.
like that. That ought to be on a billboard.
I just made it up.
Okay.
Better quickly go trademark that.
Now, can you tell the jurors, as part of the work you do there as a medical doctor, in your personal opinion, would you say you are pretty observant?
Yes.
And in your career there at Emory, have you personally ever had the occasion to treat a patient who has suffered from a gunshot wound?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
handful.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, with respect to this particular case, did you have any involvement with respect to the treatment of Diane McIver on September the 25th, 2016?
Yes, but not directly.
Okay, so let's kind of talk about that. Can you tell the jurors what you recall that it was a Sunday?
I don't remember the day.
Okay, and at that time in 2016 in September, what were your working hours?
2 p.m. to 10 p.m.
2 p.m. to 10 p.m. So, can you tell the jury, were you still at the hospital at around 10:15 or so when Diane McIver would have been brought through the emergency room?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jury what you did, first of all, what you saw, and then what you did?
It was the end of my shift. I was making sure everything was in place before I left, and there was a bit of a commotion as a patient was being brought into room 2, and that is a critical room, so I had assumed there was no physician there, so I ran there, and I was about to get started and get a sense of what we had there, but then Dr. Hardy came behind me and put her hand on my right shoulder and said, "Your shift is over, I got this."
And can you tell the jury who is Dr. Hardy?
She's one of my colleagues.
She also works there in the emergency room.
Yes.
Is she still outside when you came in?
Yes.
Okay. So when Dr. Hardy put her hand on your right shoulder and said, "Your shift is over, I got this," what did you do?
Well, then it was clear that she was going to take the reins, so to speak, and I understood what was happening very quickly and imagined what I would want me to do if I were her, and I made myself useful.
Okay. And what did you do to make yourself useful?
I believe first I went to the computer and put in routine trauma orders, and I probably finished, so that's the first thing I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just for the jury who are not really familiar with medical procedures, what are routine trauma orders?
Tetanus shot, Keflex, laboratory work, or ANSEF rather, and some routine trauma labs. Just very routine trauma stuff.
Routine stuff.
Yeah.
Those things are designed to do what? Generally.
Treat a trauma patient.
Okay. And can you describe for the jury what was the environment like in the critical care room 2 when you were there, when you saw Dr. Hardy come in?
It was busy.
What does that mean?
There were a lot of people there.
Okay. And what were the people doing?
Their job, but I wasn't really paying attention.
Okay. So what kind of people were we talking about?
There was the patient, there was Suzanne, and there were a lot of nurses.
Okay. And by Suzanne, that's Dr. Hardy's first name?
Yes.
Okay. So after you would have went to the computer, ordered the trauma
Just trauma labs,
labs,
trauma meds.
did you stay in the critical care room to assist Dr. Hardy with treating Ms. McIver?
I did not stay for the duration, but I was in and out on several occasions.
Okay. And just help the jury kind of understand, like when you say you're in and out, like what are you doing when you go out?
I have other patients in different zones, and I want to make sure that they're admitted if they have any questions. I've finished discharge paperwork. There's a lot of balls in the air.
Okay. Because at the end of your shift, it's not like 10 p.m., you get to like clock out on the dot. No. Right?
Yeah,
Right?
that's correct. It's not like that.
Okay. So can you tell the jury if one of the times you were out, did you come into contact with a person that you learned to be the husband of the patient?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jury just kind of how did you come into contact with the husband of the patient?
At one point, I had gone in and wanted to double check that Suzanne was doing okay. And I asked her if she had updated the family. She said she hadn't, and I said I would do that.
Okay. And so where did you go to update the family?
I went into the family room.
Family room?
Yes.
At the family consult room?
Yes.
Okay. And when you went into the family consult room, was anyone in there?
Yes.
Who was in there?
I believe the defendant and perhaps somebody to his left.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, this is State's Exhibit number 255. It's a photograph, and it should be right there on your screen. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, I do.
And what is the photograph of?
It's of the family room.
Okay. And this is the room where you went and you saw the defendant in this case?
Yes.
And in this photograph, are you able to point out where you saw him?
It was either in this chair or one behind the
Touch
corner.
screen, it should make a mark. Okay.
There's also two chairs here that you can't see.
Okay. And, okay, no, go ahead. I didn't cut you off.
Either this one or this one.
Okay. And so this is State's Exhibit 256.
Mm-hmm.
And I cleared the screen now. Show us where you think the defendant in this case could have been sitting when you walked into the family consult room.
I had thought that it would have been here.
Okay. And when you walked into the room, can you tell the jury, did you see him, was he doing anything?
He was leaning forward and he was focused on a telephone.
Okay. And could you overhear anything that he was saying?
No.
And so what did you say to him, if you said anything, or what did you do?
What I believe I did is I went down on a knee, leaned in, maybe put my hand on his shoulder, and told him that his family member was brought in. She was sick. We were doing the best we could to take care of her, and that I thought she was doing okay, and that we would continue to take good care of her.
Okay. Do you remember what he said back to you, if anything?
I remember a couple of things, but I'm not quite sure the order.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us what you remember, and then we'll see if we can work through the order. Okay?
Okay.
What's the first thing you remember?
I remember that he told me he was a lawyer,
Okay.
and he told me that his son was a trauma surgeon,
Okay.
maybe in California,
Okay.
and he was telling me some things about how the situation came to be.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. First, lawyer, son, surgeon. Now let me ask you for just clarification purposes for folks not smart like me.
Smart like you or not smart?
Not smart like me. I am not smart. I want to make that clear. Trauma surgeon. Are you a trauma surgeon?
Oh,
That's a different kind of doctor, right?
yes.
Okay. Tell the jury, just generally speaking, what's the difference between like the kind of doctor you are and a trauma surgeon?
There is some overlap, but the training is different. I have an emergency medicine residency, so after that, I can do some trauma surgeries in the ER. A trauma surgeon does a general surgery residency and then decides that they want to specialize in trauma.
Okay. So with respect to the kind of injuries that you knew about at the time, that being it was a gunshot wound to Mrs. McIver. Between you and a trauma surgeon, which one would be preferable, that's the right word, to deal with that kind of situation? You understand my question?
Your question is if there was a gunshot wound, who would be better treating, an ER doctor or a trauma surgeon?
Yes.
Trauma surgeon.
He told you he wasn't smart.
Just want to make sure I got it.
That's my disclaimer. Okay. So I think what you said was that also at some point in time during your interactions with Mr. McIver, that he began to tell you, what did you say? Because I don't want to get it wrong.
How the situation came to be?
How the situation came to be. And could you tell the jurors what did Mr. McIver tell you about how the situation came to be?
He said that they were going through a rough part of town. He said that the gun was in the console, but because they were going through the rough part of town, they took it out and they went over a bump when they were at the crossroads of something that started with a P and something that started with a P, and then the gun went off at the bump accidentally.
Okay. Can you tell the jury, did Mr. McIver tell you who was actually holding the gun when it went off?
I don't believe I can confidently tell you that.
Okay. And explain why you don't think you can confidently say that.
This did occur quite a long time ago, and there's a lot of details. It may have been Mrs. McIver that said something, that said she was holding it, but I know that it went off at the bump, and that's what he told me.
Hold on one second. Can you tell the jury, as you sit here today, do you recall where in what Mr. McIver told you would there have been a mention of what his wife had to do with the gun? Do you remember that?
That's the thing. I don't, and I didn't even know if she was driving or not driving or in the back seat or if he was driving or what, and I wasn't focused on those details at that time. It was about 6 minutes into a patient who got shot, and I was updating the family.
Okay.
That's all I remember.
Okay. Okay. Now, when you were talking to him in the family consult room, about how close were you to him?
I believe I was pretty close, within 2 feet.
Okay. About this close?
No,
That further?
no,
Closer?
yeah,
Okay.
maybe like this.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Huggable. Huggable.
Huggable. Okay, I won't hug you. Okay, huggable. And can you tell the jury, did you make any personal observations about Mr. McIver? First start with his physical.
Okay. He had a full head of grayish hair. I remember his face was red. I remember the general top he was wearing. And that's it.
Okay. And I'm going to show you a photograph. This is State's Exhibit number 3. You recognize the person in that photo?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you seen him in court?
No.
You don't see him?
No.
Did you look? You can look around the courtroom. Are you nervous?
Kind of.
Okay. Okay. Were you getting the stipulation?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You don't have to look around the court. But could you use this photograph and kind of tell the jurors, like, when you say he was red, like, where was he red?
Just his general face.
His general face. Okay. And did you make any observations about whether or not he was intoxicated or anything like that?
I did not have a scent recollection of anything like that.
Okay. And how was his demeanor?
Friendly?
Okay. Did he appear to be not able to understand what you were saying to him?
No, he was able to understand.
Okay. He, in your opinion, he answered all your questions appropriately?
Yes. Didn't really have too many questions, though.
You didn't have too many questions. And so how long do you think you remained inside of the family consult room with him?
Maybe 5 or 6 minutes with all that we talked about.
Okay. Bad area, rough area, bad neighborhood. What did he say exactly?
I think bad part of town or rough part of town. I didn't ask him any of those questions, so I wasn't really maybe listening too hard on the answers.
So you didn't ask him any questions. Did he just volunteer this? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Rough part of town. What was the next thing you remember that you said?
He had the crossroads that started with, I think, P, but
Okay.
I don't know the area very well, so
Okay.
didn't quite remember that.
What's the next thing?
Your Honor, I'd like to do the whole direct examination again, just so we can get a different court reporter version of it.
No, it's not. I'm not going through the whole thing again.
You're breaking it down and then you're gonna move on.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you can wrap this up.
Thank you. What's the next thing? It's okay. You just tell me. What's the next thing you told me?
The gun in the console.
Okay. What's the next thing?
Accidentally went off.
Did he mention anything about a bump?
Yeah. It accidentally went off at the bump.
At the bump. And when you, he just kind of volunteered this information to you. Did he ever volunteer to tell you who was driving the vehicle?
I don't remember ever knowing that.
Okay. Did he ever volunteer to you that he was the person that was holding the gun when it went off?
I don't remember ever hearing that or thinking about it.
Okay. And you don't remember him telling you who had the gun when it went off?
No.
Okay. Did he ever say anything to you about where he was in the car when it went off?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So, after you spoke with Mr. McIver inside of the family consult room, can you tell the jurors, did you have a second conversation with him?
Yes,
And about how much time passed between the first conversation and the second conversation?
that would be difficult to gauge, maybe 25, or 45, or 55 minutes.
Okay, some period of time.
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors during that period of time, what did you learn was going on with Mrs. McIver in critical care room 2?
She had gone from being able to speak to having lost her pulses.
And in losing her pulses, like medically, like what does that mean?
Her blood pressure is exceedingly low that a blood pressure monitor cannot sense it. So either they don't have a blood pressure or it's very minimal.
Okay, that's a pretty bad thing, isn't it?
That's why I wanted to update him.
That's why you want to update him. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And so, did you get a chance to update him?
Yes, I did.
And where was he when you updated him?
In the hallway outside the family room.
And was he alone or was he with others?
I was focused on him, and it was a hallway, so if there was an association, I wouldn't know.
Okay. Did you see other people there?
In the hallway, yeah. And there was his friend in the family room,
What do you mean by that?
the rock, his rock. A friend, it was a male, a lawyer.
Did you say the rock?
I'm getting to it, Judge.
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And where did you get that phrase from, the rock?
I believe he said it. I honestly do. I'm sorry if it's incorrect, but
No, no. Is that what you remember?
yes.
Okay. That person that he referred to as the rock, you later came to learn that it was a lawyer or his lawyer.
I have no idea. I've stayed out of the news, and I don't remember anyone talking about this mystery gentleman.
Okay. Did Mr. McIver tell you who he was?
It was his best friend.
That's what he said, his best friend.
Yeah. His best friend, my rock, a lawyer.
The best friend, my rock, my best friend, the rock, my lawyer.
One of those should be right, yeah.
Now, that person was actually inside the room?
Yes, but I never looked at him. I was looking at Mr. McIver the whole time.
And was there anyone that was outside of the room in the hallway where Mr. McIver was?
Not that I can recall.
What was he doing when he was in the hallway when you saw him?
He was on the telephone and he put it down when I came close.
And so what did you tell him?
I told him that his wife's condition was doing very well, and we were doing everything that we could to help her.
And the best window you have to maybe 45 minutes or so?
More like 45, I'd say, yeah.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, do you know whether or not Mrs. McIver had already gone to the ER by the time you talked to him the second time?
Gone up to the OR.
What did I say, ER? OR is what I meant, I'm sorry.
She was still in the ER.
Okay. What did he say when you told him that?
He was talking about his son, and I may have offered to talk to him, the son. But that's all I remember.
Okay. What was his demeanor like at that time when you gave him that information?
It seemed appropriate.
What does that mean?
It seemed appropriate. I'm not sure what else.
What did his face look like? Was it the same way as you had seen it when you talked to him earlier inside the consult room?
It seemed concerned.
Okay. Was he crying?
No.
After you gave him that information, do you recall him saying anything to you after that?
No.
Not even asking if he could see her?
No.
Can you tell the jurors, at that, how long did you stay in that hallway with Mr. McIver?
A couple of minutes, perhaps.
And then what did you do?
I went back to my computer and to my patients.
Okay. And did you ever see Mr. McIver again?
Not that I remember.
Did you ever assist Dr. Hardy with any of the treatment of Mrs. McIver after that?
After that, I don't think so.
And at some time, how long did you stay at the hospital that night?
Till about 1:30.
Okay. And when you left at 1:30, were you aware or not if Mrs. McIver had survived her injuries?
I think she was in the operating room because I remember I was worried about her and I didn't know how she was doing at that time.
By the time you left?
Correct.
Yes, okay. And so can you tell the jurors at any time after this incident, did you ever speak to any Atlanta police officer?
I don't recall.
Okay. But you did agree to meet with me at the hospital last year?
Yes, was the question, did I meet with a police officer?
An Atlanta police officer?
Outside of the ER?
Did you meet with a law enforcement officer outside the ER?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I don't get out much.
Okay. Okay. At any place, any time on Earth, did you ever meet with an Atlanta police officer about this case?
I don't believe so unless there was someone who was asking me questions that night.
Okay. Do
But
you think that's a possibility?
I mean, it happens in the ER all the time, so maybe. I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Okay. 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 I want to show you a transcript from an interview we had at the hospital last year, okay? Okay, so Okay. Take a look at this. It's a transcript. I want you to flip through it. If you need to go back to page 7 to kind of get some context, you can do that, but just want you to read it silently to yourself for just a second, and then just look up at me when you get finished reading the whole thing.
I read page 8, 7, and 9.
Okay. Speed reader. Okay. On page 8, at line 6, and you can go back to line 4 to see the question, but in line 6, after having read page 8 now, is your memory refreshed about what we talked about in the interview we did at the hospital and what you said?
To me, this page does accurately reflect what I've already stated in this court today.
Okay. And so I asked you kind of where Mr. McIver falls on the spectrum that you saw. And can you tell the jury what is your answer to that question? Not by reading it off the paper, but what you told me last year.
I think it was pretty neutral
Okay.
for the spectrum.
Okay. Did you tell me something about alcohol?
Yes, so if someone has a face that's a little rosy, the medical translation at times is they most likely they could have had a couple of drinks.
Okay.
Or perhaps chronically drink.
Okay. And that's kind of the substance of what you told me a year ago or so, was that you thought he was under the influence of alcohol?
Well, I just remember his face was red,
Okay.
which could be consistent with the chronic or acute use of alcohol.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure we got it right, but that's what you told me last year.
Yes, I remember his face was red.
Okay. And flip over to page 13 real quick. And if you would just read page 13 to yourself silently. Okay? Mm-hmm. Do you recall last year, let me see, hold on, let me go back to page 12 and get the question. Okay. In response to the question, what do you remember him saying? Do you recall telling me anything about your interpretation of what he said was that she was holding it behind her and it accidentally went off?
I believe she said that part. He didn't. I know it was behind someone's back and it accidentally went off at the bump, but I don't know whose back it was behind or where that person was.
Consult room. Had you heard Mrs. McIver say
Of thinking about the trajectory of a bullet and if it was my patient, what I would be most concerned about or what I would do first based on the potential trajectory of the minimal information I had, and I couldn't quite figure it out.
Okay. So at the time you were talking to him, you were trying to figure out mentally about the trajectory.
Correct.
Okay. And you think at the time that you were talking to Mr. McIver in the consult room, that sometime in the critical care room, before you spoke to him, Mrs. McIver said she was holding it behind her. Is that what you're saying?
She may have.
Okay. And then later on, in response,
Or maybe she said it was an accident. I just don't remember.
okay. Okay. And then you go on to tell me kind of what you said today, which is Mr. McIver told you they were in a rough neighborhood and that it was an accident, he said. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. At the time that you spoke to Mr. McIver, did he ever complain to you about any anxiety?
No.
How about any sleep disorder
No.
or amnesia?
No.
All right. I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Mr. Samuel?
Good morning, Doctor. We've not met before. My name is Don Samuel. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Did you ask him anything about his sleep disorder?
No?
Was there anything in your conversation that would have prompted him to say, let me tell you about my sleep disorder?
No.
That wasn't really relevant to anything that was going on with you when you were talking with him, correct?
Correct.
Had he said something like that to you, by the way, let me tell you about my sleep disorder, you would have thought, that's certainly out of place for our conversation, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, you said initially, when answering Mr. Ruck's questions here, that his demeanor was appropriate, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that's your testimony in remembering what his demeanor was as you sit here and testify today, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You said his complexion was kind of red, correct?
Yes.
If he had been out on the golf course for 4 or 5 hours in the afternoon, what typically happens to someone on a golf course for 4 hours in the afternoon in the September sun, that's a hint, in Georgia?
They might appear flushed.
Make a sunburn, right?
Mhm. Oh, yeah, that too.
That's it. Okay. And when you were asked by Mr. Rucker a year ago, 8 months ago, did you smell alcohol? Remember smelling alcohol, correct?
I don't remember smelling alcohol. I don't believe that that's written, though.
Well, we have different pages, but it's, I'm going to show you the same transcript with different page numbers, if I may. Your Honor?
You may.
This is the same transcript, but different titles.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So you were asked, did you ever smell any alcohol? And you say, not that I remember, correct?
Correct.
All right. When you initially talked to him, is it correct that he asked you, is this life-threatening?
He may have.
And does that indicate to you that he didn't know the answer to that when he came in, when he initially asked you that question?
That would be rational
Okay.
follow-up.
And did I understand that you said she's doing okay?
The first time I went to update him, oh, yeah.
So she's in the ER then. You already know it's a gunshot wound, right?
Yes.
And I'm not saying you have to be truthful or not. I'm just trying to figure out what he's hearing. You said she is doing okay.
I mean, to clear up, the first time I updated him, I wanted to let him know that my exact words was, she had her own pulse, she had her own blood pressure. So I wanted to update him that she was alive and doing okay.
Okay. That's fine. then, we kind of laughed a little while ago. Mr. Rucker said, what's the difference between different types of surgeons? Do you find that people don't always know that different types of surgeons do different kinds of things?
Yeah, I
In
do.
fact, Mr. Rucker's a pretty bright guy, and he's saying to you, we don't all know, right?
Yes.
Okay. When you're in the ER and you're with a bunch of nurses and doctors and you're doing your residency or you're in medical school, everybody knows the difference, right?
Most everyone.
Yeah. But even in the medical school?
Yeah.
But, where'd you go to school?
Which one?
But when you're out in the community, people don't know the difference, do they?
No.
Well, I would object to where he's going because it really calls for to speculate about what everybody in the community knows.
Well, that's not everybody, but some people. That's okay. Yes.
Made a point. If you want to move on, that'd be great.
And then finally, can I share my transcript?
You may, as long as the state knows where you are.
Let me back up. Were you in the ER and heard Ms. McIver talking to your colleague, Dr. Hart?
So in my memory, she's speaking and her eyes are open and I'm hearing her. I don't know who she's talking to.
Okay. And do you remember what was being said by her?
On at least one occasion, I can recall.
Speak up, just even this close, I can barely hear you. Can you speak up a little bit?
On at least one occasion, I can recall.
And what was it that you heard her say?
If she wanted her husband in the room.
Okay. Did you hear her talking about the gun?
I believe when she first came in and was being placed from the wheelchair to the gurney, she said it was an accident.
Okay. And you were in the room when that happened?
Yes.
Okay. Is that before IV fluids and before?
Yes.
Okay. So she's taken from the wheelchair and put on the gurney. And she says it was an accident. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, you knew it was a gunshot, obviously, right?
Yes, there was one on her back. It wasn't through and through.
When
But
she said it was an accident, you didn't think she'd fallen off a ladder?
oh yeah,
or
no.
something.
Mm-mm.
And then, is it correct that Mr. McIver never said to you who was holding the gun when it went off? He never said to you, she's holding the gun when it went off, correct?
I cannot remember that he told me who. That is right.
Do you remember when you were talking to Mr. Rucker, wherever it was, here or back in the hospital? He asked you, do you recall him ever giving you any indication about who would have been holding the gun at the time it went off? And you said, absolutely not.
Okay, so that's consistent, right?
Can I testify? Not this trial.
Is that accurate?
Let's see.
I'm just looking at this and you did.
Yeah, I read this transcript and that's what probably made me hedged a little bit, but I said absolutely not, so I'll stick with that.
Okay. So he never said she's holding the gun. This is McIver's holding the gun when it went off, right? Absolutely not. Correct?
That's why I don't understand why I'm here. I don't know who was holding it.
You can ask Ken, and you can ask Ken, but you can't ask me.
But you are here, so we're going to keep going.
Okay.
She's answered that one pretty emphatically. Mr. Rucker, any follow-up?
Just a couple. I want to make sure, because you have told us it's been a year, but you have your transcript in front of you, page 8.
Make sure she's got the same version you've got.
I think she's got the one I gave her.
Right.
Yeah. No. Here at line 1, on page 8, it actually is a continuation of on page 7, and my question was, I'm just trying to find out kind of where he falls on that spectrum that you saw. And didn't you tell me, I suppose I would say, that he wouldn't have been as distraught as I would have anticipated, but I kind of thought it was because he was under the influence of alcohol.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Samuel asked you about, did you ask him if he had a sleep disorder? Did you ask him those kinds of things? Because that's not really why you were in the room to talk to him, right?
That is correct.
Okay. But when you went in to talk to him, he did volunteer some things that you never asked him about, right?
Correct.
So my question is to you, he didn't volunteer to you that he fell asleep, right?
No.
He didn't volunteer to you that, hey, I have a sleep disorder that makes me involuntarily move and do things, right?
Not those words, no.
Right. Did he volunteer to you that he thought that there were protesters from Black Lives Matter around?
Entirely irrelevant. Let's not go there.
Okay. Okay. He did volunteer to you that he went over a bump.
Yes.
And that's what caused the gun to go off.
I think that was the sentence, yeah.
Okay. Now, you were actually in critical care room 2 when Mrs. McGurney was taken from the wheelchair to the gurney, the bed?
It wasn't just a moment, but during the process, I was there for a moment of it, the process.
Okay. And is your recollection, strike that. Let me ask you a question. What is your recollection about her condition at that time when she was in the wheelchair?
It was when she was transferred from the wheelchair to the gurney. So she was not hooked up to the monitors, Caucasian female. Looked like she was not feeling very well. That's my impression.
Okay. Was she able to move on her own accord?
I didn't see her specifically move any limb, but if she was able to speak words, I'm sure she was able to move.
So your recollection is that how was she laid out? How was she in the wheelchair? Upright?
First, and people were taking off her top, and then it was flat later on when I had gone in.
Okay. So I don't want to be kind of confused. So is your recollection that when she was brought into the critical care room through the ER, she was actually she was upright in the wheelchair?
No, my recollection is not when she was in the chair. It was after she was on the gurney.
Okay.
People were taking her top off, so although the stretcher was flat, she was upright in terms of her torso.
Okay. Was the gurney raised?
No, she had just gotten to the gurney, so it by default is flat.
Okay. And you're saying she was sitting up on her own?
No, because people were taking off her top.
Okay. Okay. And so I thought that what you said to Mr. Samuel was that as she was going from the wheelchair to the gurney is when she spoke. Is that what you're saying?
Honestly, it's a long process, and we're splitting this up into many different pieces.
Right.
I think she was on the gurney, but she had just gotten from the wheelchair. I'm not sure what moment in time it was.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Because after she got to the gurney, that's when the work began, right?
Work began after she was on the gurney.
Right. And so your recollection is that at some point in time when she was on the gurney, after the work began, is when she spoke.
She could have spoken in the process as well.
Do you know that?
No, I'm just speculating.
Okay. I don't want you to speculate. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't.
I can't time the words with the pictures in my head.
Okay. And did you say earlier that it was not a through and through gunshot wound?
Yeah, I did say that.
And why did you say that?
Because I ultrasounded her left torso and there was not a gunshot wound.
Wait, say that one more time.
I believe I put the ultrasound probe on her left upper torso, and I don't believe I saw a gunshot wound.
Her left upper torso, front or back?
Front.
Front. So is it my left or
Patient's left.
patient's left? So it's this side or this side?
Your left.
My left. So you probed this part of her body with the ultrasound to look for a gunshot wound.
No, specifically, I was looking at her heart through her breast implant to look in the pericardium for blood. That was my only goal.
Okay. So when you said it was not a through and through gunshot wound, you weren't looking for a gunshot wound?
Oh, no, I was not.
Okay. So did you know the bullet came out the front?
No, it was all from him telling me the gun went off at the bump, and I'm trying to picture the trajectory in my head.
Okay. And in trying to picture the trajectory, when we met at the hospital, do you remember kind of demonstrating what he said? If you kind of put your hand behind your back? Show the jurors what you showed me when we went to the hospital about what you were putting together in your head about the trajectory. If you could stand up so they could see you. That's what you showed me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, right. Just that is the point. And I guess, is that why we kind of stayed a little while on your part in the transcript? Is that why you interpreted to me that you thought she was holding the gun?
It could be.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the jurors? You would pass them, please, to the left. Doctor, you mentioned that you heard, thank you, your colleague, Dr. Hardy, ask Ms. McIver if she wanted to see her husband, speak with her husband.
Yes.
Did you hear what, if anything, Ms. McIver said in response?
Yes.
What did she say?
No.
You mentioned that Mr. McIver asked you a couple of questions during your initial conversation with him. The everyone in the family consult room.
Yes.
Do you remember what it was he asked?
Is she okay? Is she going to be okay? Perhaps he also asked if we had surgeons here.
Okay. Mr. Rucker, any follow-up?
Really brief. Can you tell the jurors who else was in the room when you heard Mr. McIver say no in response to the question of do you want to see your husband?
Dr. Hardy is all I remember.
Okay. And when Mr. McIver asked you whether or not there were any surgeons there at the hospital, what was your response?
I cannot remember my response, but most likely I answered him correctly.
Which was?
I guess I don't know what I said.
Okay. Were there surgeons at the hospital that night?
I wouldn't know,
Why not?
because I was not taking care of the patient primarily.
Okay. But generally speaking, are there surgeons at the hospital at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night on Sunday?
At our hospital,
Yes.
it would not be a guarantee.
Okay. Okay. And what Mr. McIver told you when you did speak to him, though, is that his son was a trauma surgeon, right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Sam, any follow-up? Did he say, and maybe you answered this a long time ago, but did he say where his son lived?
I thought he may have said California.
And a question about when do you want to see your husband? Early in the ER, late in the ER? Time that she's in there,
Much later.
much later. She's already hooked up to IVs, hooked up lots of tubes going in and out, right?
Yes.
The clothes have been taken off, right?
Yes.
She's in pain, correct?
I do not know.
You didn't hear her saying anything about my stomach hurts?
No, I did not.
She's on her way to the OR to be treated before Dr. Hardy asked that question, correct?
Not correct.
Not correct. Well, I don't mean out the door. The decision had been made to send her to OR because there were surgeons there, correct?
That would have been Dr. Hardy's decision. It would not have been going through my head.
I wasn't asking what was going through your head.
Okay.
She went to the OR that night, right?
Eventually, or early morning. I don't know.
There were surgeons there, correct? Or you wouldn't go to the OR, right?
Sir, honestly, I had nothing to do with surgeons or what time she went to the OR.
Okay. My question was, if you go to the OR, doesn't that mean there were surgeons?
If you go to the OR, yes, someone will be there to receive you.
Okay. And you know she went to the OR?
I know she eventually went to the OR.
Okay. And you know she had surgery?
Yes, when I left work, I knew she was on her way to the OR or in surgery.
Okay. Doctor, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
You're free to go.
Thank you.
We will be in recess. Let's try to get back together at 1:20. 1:20. Ladies and gentlemen, during the break, you're free to go wherever, eat whatever, if you're going to eat. Don't talk about the case, no outside research, and we will be back in here with the state's next witness at 1:20. Please.
All rise for the jury.